Story 1. Mom and brother bullied me for years when Dad was away, so I recorded them and sent it to him. Now he filed for divorce and my family is saying I should never have been born. I, 16F, have an older brother, 18M, and he is pretty much the golden child, but just for my mother. My mom has never bothered to hide it from anybody that she has a favorite child. And well, it is not me. Right from when I was a child, I knew that my mom liked my brother way more than she liked me. I could never figure out the reason for it because I would always try to mimic my brother and do whatever he does, just as an attempt to win my mother over. But whatever quality she found to be endearing in him, she found annoying in me. So eventually, I gave up trying to impress her because that was an impossible task. At least my father seemed to like me for who I am as a person and did not expect me to be an exact replica of my brother in order to find me worthy of being loved. My father didn't have a favorite. He treated my brother and me as equals, and I am and forever will be grateful for that because at least I had one parent who was normal and had my back. My mother, unfortunately, was not the best person to be around, and she made sure that this certain side of hers only came out when she was alone with my brother and I. She never even put a toe out of line whenever my dad was around. Things would have been much easier for me if my dad had been around for long. But when I was younger he had to travel a lot for work and still does, so I ended up spending a lot of time with my mother and brother. The problem was that my mom was a stay-at-home mother, and she was just always there. Anytime I would come back home from school, she was there to start bullying me immediately and make me doubt myself. She would constantly comment on my appearance and constantly find things that she could nitpick at, giving me new insecurities every day. For the record, I was an exceptionally skinny child and nobody likes that in women, something that my mother constantly reminded me of. I also had glasses and really weird hair, which she also seemed to hate because in spite of the horrible person that she was deep down, she was actually quite pretty and so was my brother. She kept saying that she wished I had also inherited her genes, but unfortunately, I was an ugly duckling, and she made sure that I didn't forget about it. There was also the fact that my brother was great at a lot of things like sports and academics. I was a good student and academically sound, but I was miserable at sports. I am serious, I had zero hand-eye coordination and I hated any athletic activities, but my mother always pushed me into taking part because she believed that it would somehow fix my body and make me more desirable to look at. She would also force-feed me things that she thought were good for me, like excessive amounts of protein. Let's be honest, there is only so much meat that people can consume before they start feeling nauseated at the sight of it, and that's what happened to me. It's probably why I switched to vegetarianism a few years ago because of all the beef and chicken that my mother fed me as a child. It didn't help me either, 'cause some people are just built skinny and I happen to be one of those people. I didn't even have a problem with my body until my mother started picking on it, and to hide it, I started wearing really baggy clothes and my brother's old hand-me-downs because I was scared of what my mother would say if I wore clothes that showed off my body. So that's how things were for me up until a few years ago, which is when I found out that the one thing that I was really good at was swimming. I hadn't tried it before because my mother hadn't pushed me to, since she herself was pretty scared of the water. But then I got an opportunity to try out for the swimming team a couple of years ago, and that's when I started. And I have got to say, I don't mean to come off cheesy, but that practically changed my life. I finally had something that I was good at and I started putting my heart and soul into it. In no time, I started getting more toned and actually put on a considerable amount of weight, which made me look better. And I was also a lot more confident in myself because I was finally getting better and I was just very happy. My mother and brother, however, were not very thrilled about this development because it just meant that they had fewer opportunities to pick on me about my appearance. I was looking better now, so they had nothing to say about it, and for a while I almost thought that they would give up. But I really underestimated how much the two of them disliked me because soon after, they started finding other ways to annoy me. They started giving me what I call the Cinderella treatment because they expected me to be at their back and call throughout the day. Anytime they saw me sitting around and just relaxing, they would assign me some work to do, and soon enough it was like I was doing all the chores around the house. Actually, let me correct that, it wasn't like I was doing everything around the house. I was doing everything around the house. Whenever my father was away on a business trip, they would make sure that I did all the work around the house while they just made up excuses and found ways to get out of doing whatever needed to be done. Any time that I would tell them that I was tired or exhausted from school, they would just tell me that I had to do it because if I didn't do the chores around the house, there was nobody else to do it. because my mother was also tired since she was getting old, even though she was just in her 40s and it's not even that old. And well, my brother was involved in so many activities at school that it was quite believable for him to be exhausted all the time, enough to get out of doing all the work. So I was, to put it bluntly, their Cinderella, and I was doing all the work around the house while they just sat back and let me do it. And not let me do it, they wanted me to do it because that would tire me out and I would have to give up eventually. But I made up my mind that no matter what, I was not going to give up the one thing that brought me joy. And anyway, they would only put me through this whenever my father was not around, which happened to be for almost half of the month. But then for the other half, they would just have to be normal and we would have to do our own chores. Now, a lot of you might be wondering, why did I never talk to my father about this? Well, for starters, I didn't want to stir any trouble in my family because at the end of the day, I wanted everybody to be happy. I guess one could say that I was a bit of a people pleaser, and that led to most of my problems. I was always just trying to make everybody happy, and I knew that my dad really loved my mother. They were high school sweethearts and they married as soon as they graduated from college. I had heard about how much they loved each other from various relatives. I knew that it would just break my father's heart if he ever got to know about what a monster my mother had turned into. So I never said anything because I didn't want to break his heart. To be more precise, I didn't want to be the one who had to break his heart by telling him the truth. So I just hoped and prayed that maybe either he would come across the truth on his own or maybe my mother, by some miracle, would become a good person, but that never happened. I also had a nagging doubt that maybe if I told my father the truth, he would just not believe me. And since my mother and my brother always put up a great act in front of him of being a good parent and a good sibling, there were quite high chances of that happening. And I didn't want to get ahead of myself, tell my dad how my mother was treating me and how my brother seemed to enjoy it, and then not have him believe me because that would ruin the only good relationship that I had with anybody in my family. So I just decided to keep my mouth shut and suffered through it all silently. But recently, I changed my mind and I decided that I was going to have to expose my mother and my brother because they were getting a little too much. I was getting very, very tired of doing all the work around the house because while earlier I didn't have much homework because I was in a lower grade, I was in a few AP classes now and I couldn't afford to lose any more time and energy. I also got a phone a couple of months ago, something that I didn't have earlier because my parents were the kind of people who believed that it would ruin my future, and I don't know if they were right or not, but it was definitely quite annoying and inconvenient to say the least. So for my 16th birthday, my father got me a brand new phone of my own for my personal use. Now, these two factors combined led me to the conclusion that I absolutely had to expose my mother and my brother now because I had the means to, and I was also just really tired of how they had been treating me for the past couple of years just because they did not want to see me happy. 2 weeks back, I got my first C on an assignment because the day before I was supposed to submit it, I had to do a lot of laundry because my mom refused to do it and my brother claimed that he was too tired. And so I had to do it because I needed clean clothes to wear and there would be a lot of hue and cry about it if I just decided to do my own clothes and left theirs out. So I decided to do all of it, and it took up a huge chunk of my time, which is why I was not able to devote enough time and energy to my essay, which is why it came off a bit half-hearted and I got a bad grade because of it, which was really unfair because it wasn't even my fault, but the teacher didn't know how I was being treated at home, so I wasn't exactly going to blame her either. I confronted my mother when I came back home after I got my essay graded and told her that I was not going to do any of the work around the house and that she and her son would have to pull their weight. But she just told me that it was my own fault that I had flunked because if I had just put in a little more effort, then I probably wouldn't have to be making excuses for myself, and brought up how my brother was still able to score well while taking part in everything else. And here I was, making excuses and blaming other people for my own failures. I think that was my breaking point, my last straw, and I decided that I had to put an end to this because I had had enough. I couldn't record it at the time, but I decided that the next time she would say something or do something of the sort, I would have my camera set up to capture it all and I would send it to my dad and he would deal with this. After that incident, the next day my dad came back home and stayed here with us for a few days until he had to leave again and we were on our own. And this time, I knew that as soon as he left, the two of them would gang up against me and bully me into doing their dirty work. So the day that my dad left, I had my phone set up to record as soon as he left. And just as I had expected, my mom and my brother barged into my room as soon as my dad had left and started giving me a list of chores that I had to do. They didn't even say please, just told me that I had to do this and that, and then at the end, they said that I needed to get to work. But this time, I decided to put my foot down just to see what would happen, and I told them that I was not going to do any of it. Luckily, they thought that it would be a good idea to be nasty to me because they were not aware of the camera that I had set up in my room and the fact that I was recording them. My mother called me a lazy cow and said that she was just training me to do all the work around the house because, given my grades and my laziness, I would never amount to anything, so it was pointless for me to study and waste their money. And my brother joined in and started saying that just because he could do it all didn't mean that I could as well, and I should just give up trying because it was pathetic, and I should just stick to doing the household chores because at least it would guarantee me a housekeeper job in the future. They said a few other nasty things as well and were really being mean at that time, more than usual, which was lucky for me because I recorded it all. My blood was boiling, but I kept my mouth shut because I knew that this was probably the last time that they would get the opportunity to pick on me like this and gang up against me. I was about to put an end to it forever. Once they had had their fun, my mother told me to get to work as soon as possible instead of wasting my time and then left the room and shut the door behind her. As soon as she left, I decided to stop recording and send the video to my father with a long message about how this is the kind of treatment that I've been receiving at home for the past God knows how many years. And I told him everything, literally everything that I had been keeping to myself for so long. I told him about all the bullying, the way that the two of them ganged up against me whenever he was not around and how they had been making me work like a maid for them. I also made sure to mention all the nasty comments that the two of them had always been making against me, how I had been afraid to stand up against them for so long because of all the bullying, and that it had really taken a toll on me because it was affecting my grades now. I guess it hadn't even been an hour since my father had left the house when I sent him that video, and I figured that he might have been on his flight at that point, but luckily he hadn't boarded his flight yet and he had been able to see my message before that. As soon as he saw it, he told me to lock myself in my room and not do anything and that he was coming back home immediately. For about 45 minutes, I stayed quietly in my room and then I heard my dad pull up in the driveway, and I knew that things were about to go down. Now, I stayed in my room even after I heard my mom open the door and ask my father what he was doing back home so soon. Literally seconds later, I heard my dad yelling at my mom about the video that I had sent her, and he asked her and my brother what they were playing at. They tried to pass it off as a prank, but my father had read the message that I had sent him and he told them to cut it out because he knew everything, and he demanded an explanation. And that's when my mother realized that the jig was up. There was no hiding it anymore, and my dad had finally found out about the way she had been treating me. She started begging and apologizing, saying that her frustration got the better of her because she was just tired and she took it out on me. But my dad called her on it and said that he knew the real reason for it. I don't know what that was about, and I still don't know because my dad refuses to tell me anything about it. But anyway, after that, they went into their bedroom and I could hear them yelling, but I couldn't make out the words, so I don't know what they were fighting about. All I know is that after about half an hour, my mother was packing her bags and leaving while sobbing hysterically, and my dad told my brother to go with her, and he agreed, no questions asked. I had come out of my room by that point and I had no idea what was going on, but I knew that whatever was happening, it was not good. After the two of them had left, it was just me and my dad, and I finally worked up the courage to ask him what had happened. He didn't tell me much. He just told me that I was safe now and that I wouldn't have to put up with my mother anymore. My dad seemed to be in a pretty bad mood at the time, so I didn't ask any further questions and decided to lock myself back in my room again. The next day, he came to me and told me that he was sorry about the way he had behaved the previous day, but he just had a lot going on. And he said that now I wouldn't have to worry about my mother ever again. He told me that he was filing for a divorce and that it was just going to be me and him now because my mother was out of the picture. He also apologized for the fact that I even had to put up with her for so long, and he said that he wished that I had told him about what was going on earlier so he would have nipped it in the bud. But regardless, he had made his decision and he hoped that we would have a better future now. I was actually pretty happy that they were getting divorced because it just meant that I would not have to deal with my mother again. She had made me miserable along with my brother for 16 years of my life, and by sending one video to my dad, I had just made sure that she wouldn't be able to do that for the next 16 years as well. So I was pretty proud of myself for standing up to her and finally calling her out. It was well-deserved and it was about time that I did it. The next few days were quite peaceful because my dad would just work in his office quietly and we would talk at mealtimes, but other than that, we mostly kept to ourselves. I knew that he was hurting, but I didn't know how to fix that, so I just tried to be there for him in my own little ways. We would have good conversations whenever we were talking, so that was one way for me to bring some peace to him, but other than that, I knew that he was heartbroken and that he really missed my mother. And then a few days ago, my mother was finally served with the divorce papers, and I found out about it because my grandparents, my mom's parents, decided that they were going to call me up and yell at me about it. My grandparents and I have never been on the best of terms because they were just an extension of my mother, and I didn't like them at all. So when they called me, I thought I would just decline the call, but then they kept calling me and eventually I had to answer the call. As soon as I picked up, they started yelling at me and told me that I was a curse on this family and that everyone would be much better off without me. They have always hated me, but this was taking things a little too far, so I told them that they couldn't speak to me this way. But they said that they could speak to me however they wanted to because I had ruined their daughter's life. They said that I was the reason that she was getting divorced now and that all these years of marriage had been completely flushed down the drain because of me and that one video that I sent. They called me ungrateful because it was my mother who had brought me into the world in spite of several complications during her pregnancy that I didn't even know about, and yet I had stabbed her in the back and screwed her over. My grandma told me that my mother had brought me into the world at the risk of losing her own life, not so I could ruin her marriage one day, and told me that she wished her daughter had terminated the pregnancy like she had suggested because that would have been better than having a daughter like me. My grandpa decided to twist the knife even more and told me that my mother was inconsolable after she received the divorce papers, and asked me if I was finally happy now, since I had the house to myself and my father was never going to see my mother again. I tried to tell him that that wasn't even my intention and I didn't tell my father to divorce my mom, but they hung up before I could say anything to defend myself and then blocked me. And since then, I have been racked with guilt because I feel like the worst person on earth right now. I know that they were trying to manipulate me, and I feel like they succeeded a little bit because I just feel so bad about what happened and I feel that I need to fix this somehow. Aita for sending my dad a video of my mom and my brother teaming up against me to make me work for them, which led to him filing for divorce. Update 1. Hey, so a lot of you people were asking if I'm adopted or if I was an unwanted child, and I don't have the answer to that as of now. But I know for a fact that I'm not adopted, that's for sure. I might have been an unwanted child for my mother, though. That was pretty evident from her behavior. I'm not apologizing to her and I'm definitely not trying to take back whatever I did. I'm not telling my father to cancel the divorce or whatever. That's just too much. My grandparents and my mom can stay mad. After everything that they put me through for all these years, they can't expect anything good from me or any forgiveness or sympathy at all. They do not deserve it, and they have proven it to me time and again, especially with all the things that my grandparents said to me on the phone call the other day. It's a miracle that I even felt guilty about anything, but I guess that's just the people-pleaser in me and I'm trying to work on it so it doesn't get to me and affect my future decisions. I have talked to my dad about it and we think that it's a good idea for me to start therapy because I told him that the only reason that I didn't tell him anything for so long was because I didn't want to make anybody unhappy, and I knew that if I told him about my mother, it would break his heart. There was also the fact that I hoped that my mom would eventually come around and treat me like a human being, but it never happened. There was also a lot of self-doubt because for some reason, I believed that maybe my dad would not believe me if I told him the truth, so I had to get proof of everything first. And I just have a lot of issues to work through, so we are considering therapy right now, and if everything goes well, I might start in a couple of days. Update 2. Hi, so I'm back here and I finally have the answer to why my mother hated me. You guys were right. I wasn't adopted, but I definitely was an unwanted pregnancy. I finally asked my dad about what he had said while arguing with my mother the day that he kicked her out of the house. In my original post, I mentioned that there was a part where my dad had said that he knew the real reason why my mother was treating me so badly, but I didn't ask him about it that day because it had been a very emotionally draining day for all of us and I didn't want to add on to his troubles. Plus, it didn't seem like something he wanted to discuss either, so I just let it be. But today, a couple of hours ago, I finally brought it up with my dad and asked him about what he meant by it because after that, he had gone into their own room and I couldn't hear the rest of the argument, so I didn't know what that was about. And today, he finally told me that I had actually been an unwanted pregnancy and my mom was done after one kid. She wanted to terminate the pregnancy when she found out about me, but my dad was a little upset about it and she decided to keep the baby just for my dad's sake. He didn't tell her to, but he was just upset, which is why she did it anyway. And then I was born after a lot of complications and issues and it took a lot out of my mother, which is why she kind of resented me after I was born. But my dad never expected her to treat me this way. She had said that she never felt connected to me as a baby, but he just assumed it was one of the symptoms of postpartum depression. He thought that it would go away with time, but it never did. Both of us started crying because even though I had known about this, I had sort of guessed it on my own, it still hurt to hear it from him. And he told me that he felt responsible for everything that I had been through, and we hugged and had a really emotionally relieving conversation. I feel much better now, knowing the truth is finally out in the open. I don't owe my mother anything, and while I'm grateful that she brought me into the world, she didn't really treat me well after that. So I don't have anything to be grateful to her for anymore. I bear no ill will towards her, and I'm letting go of everything gracefully. Update 3. Hey folks, so I've been in therapy for about 2 weeks now, and I have 2 sessions per week. It's been going well so far, and during this time, I think I'm only going to get better. I have 1 solo session and 1 session with my dad, so we can also work on our relationship and rebuild it from scratch so that we can have a healthier bond going forward. The divorce proceedings have also started, and a few days ago, my mom and my brother came back to collect the last of their things because my mom was moving in permanently with her parents, and so was my brother. They didn't speak to me and avoided eye contact to the best of their abilities, which I am thankful for because it just meant that I wouldn't have to deal with them or speak to them either. They can hate me all they want to, but it doesn't change the fact that they were the ones who brought this situation upon themselves by treating me with nothing but cruelty all their lives. Now they deserve whatever they get, and I refuse to feel sorry for them. All I care about right now is rebuilding my relationship with my dad and just being as happy as I can, living my life to the fullest. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Daughter publicly trashed me after she sided with my ex during divorce and cut me out of her life. Years later, she tried to crash my wedding and is now demanding an apology. I, 45F, got married for a second time a week ago to James, 39M. He and I have been together for the past 4 years after we met through some common friends, and after living together for almost 2 years, we finally decided to make it official. But my wedding was almost ruined by my daughter, and James had to kick her out to prevent her from causing a scene at the wedding. Now, everybody is blaming me and accusing me of having failed as a mother because she was really upset at being kicked out. My daughter, April, 19F, wasn't even invited to the wedding, and I know it sounds bad, but I had valid reasons for not inviting her. She and I had no contact for a couple of years because she had taken her dad's side in the divorce and had publicly insulted me. My ex-husband, Donald, 47M, and I got divorced 6 years ago because we just weren't compatible anymore, and I was sick of trying to make our marriage work. He and I got married really young when we were in our early 20s and had April shortly after. Things started changing and getting difficult for both of us once we had a daughter because now there were several more expenses that we had to think of, and Donald just wasn't taking his job seriously. It felt like he was never going to get promoted, and I would have to continue doing everything for him. He was incompetent at all the household work, and I could pretty much say the same thing for anything to do with April. He was just lazy, and it was like he wasn't even interested in stepping up and helping me out. I got tired of doing everything on my own, and being with him was becoming exhausting for me, but I still pushed myself and tried to make that marriage work for several years. I had fallen out of love with him way before I even filed for divorce, but I was trying to make it work for the sake of our daughter. Unfortunately, even April was becoming like a miniature version of my ex-husband and expected me to constantly run after her and do everything for her. It was really difficult for me to deal with both of them since I was not only working in the office, but I didn't get a moment to myself even after I came back home. They would make me do even the most basic of tasks for them, and the worst part was that they were never even grateful for any of it and practically treated me like a maid around the house. I just got sick of it one day, and I decided to move out without telling anyone, and then I filed for divorce. My parents and a couple of my friends were really supportive, so I didn't have to worry about where I would live or even about finding a lawyer. Donald tried to get me to come back when he was served with the divorce papers and said that he would change, but it was too little and too late for me, so I rejected that and said that I was going through with the divorce and he couldn't change my mind. He tried many times to win me over and get me back, but when, even after almost a week and a half, I still hadn't changed my mind, he changed gears and told me that he was going to make sure that I regretted the divorce. He hired one of the best divorce attorneys with the help of his father, who was paying for everything, and decided to file for full custody of April and tried his very best to make sure that I didn't get much from the divorce. His lawyer was ruthless, and it was a really long and difficult process for me personally because they were dragging my name through the mud, and I just didn't stand a chance since they had manipulated all the facts and made me seem like an unstable and selfish person. Worst of all, they had portrayed me as a terrible mother, and April had actually been part of it. She had made a very public post on social media during the divorce where she claimed that I was a bully and that I constantly kept picking on her. She said that I made her miserable and she wanted nothing to do with me after the divorce. She added that she wanted her dad to have custody and wished that I wouldn't even have visiting rights. That was pretty much the final nail in the coffin because if April herself didn't want to live with me, then there was no point of a mediator or any custody battle. She had made it very clear to the world that she preferred Donald over me and would rather live with him, so the custody battle ended with Donald getting full custody of April, and I got visiting rights, but they would have to be supervised. I did get the house in the divorce, but that was about it, and it broke my heart because I had wanted my daughter to be on my side and to realize that her father was not the man that she imagined him to be. She was just 13, which is probably why she didn't understand that being the fun parent wasn't enough, and that he was raising her to be just as lazy and incompetent as him. It would be cute for a while, just like it had worked out for Donald while we were in college, but that sort of behavior wouldn't fly when she was in the real world and didn't have her family to shield her from real-life responsibilities and expectations. It was devastating for me, but I still tried to keep in touch with April in spite of the things that she had said about me because she was obviously being misled by Donald. Even during the divorce, before she made that post, I would often pick her up from school to spend time with her, and she would try to convince me not to go through with the divorce. I would try to tell her that I was just miserable in that marriage and it was better for all of us if her father and I separated. We would argue about it, but she would at least talk to me. In the weeks leading up to that post, she just cut me off, and even when I would try to pick her up after school to hang out, she would blow me off to spend time with her friends or make up some excuse and avoid me. It was very clear to me that something had changed, and it was Donald who had convinced her that I was the bad guy here. Nonetheless, I tried to keep in touch with her after the divorce, but she just wouldn't speak to me, and because Donald had full custody and I could only get supervised visits, he had a lot more control over her and made sure that I didn't get to see her more than once or twice in 6 months. I tried to reach out to her online, but she blocked me there. I even tried to renegotiate the custody terms, but my lawyer advised me against it because it was just too soon and they had already painted a very negative and unstable image of me. I was also struggling at work, so it was just not a good time for me. I made one of the most difficult decisions that I have ever had to make. I showed up at Donald's house unannounced one day and demanded to see April. I caused a racket when he said no, and April came into the living room to check out what was going on. When I saw her, I asked her point blank if she wanted me as her mother or not. I didn't beat about the bush, and I tried not to let any of my emotions show on my face. She thought about it for a while, and then she told me that she didn't consider me her mother anymore because I had broken up their happy family, because I was too selfish to think about her. So now she wanted nothing to do with me. I had already seen that coming, but I just wanted to hear it from her before I cut her out of my life, just so I would at least have the satisfaction of knowing that I tried my best and wouldn't have any regrets in the future. Once April had made it clear to me that she didn't want me to reach out to her anymore, I stopped trying because I needed to get my life back on track. It was a really difficult call for me to make because I had to cut the most important person out of my life, and it was devastating for me, but I powered through it somehow and threw myself into my work. I did keep tabs on April, and I knew that she was doing well in school. I wanted to reach out tomorrow a couple of times, but I held myself back because I felt like if she wanted to talk to me and make things right with me, then she would have to take the first step. Because now that I was older and had already gone through so much, I was too fragile to handle another heartbreak at the hands of my own daughter. So I didn't talk to her for years after the divorce, which is why I didn't even consider inviting her to my wedding. For starters, I didn't even think that she would want to be invited because if somebody doesn't reach out to you after almost 6 years, then it probably doesn't even occur to you that this person might want to reconnect. So when the invitations were sent out, I didn't include my daughter on the list because we hadn't spoken for a really long time, and I didn't want to get insulted once again. But somehow, she managed to find the details of my wedding, probably from some loose-lipped relatives, and then showed up on the day of my wedding. I got really lucky because by the time she turned up, James and I were already done with the ceremony, and we were just about to have our first dance as a married couple. We had a really great security team because they knew better than to bother us while we were in the middle of something. Instead, they waited until they knew for a fact that we were done with our first dance, and then they summoned us outside to ask if April was wanted at the wedding or not. Apparently, they had caught her trying to sneak inside the venue after they had denied her entry the first time. April looked furious and demanded that I let her in because, after all, she was my daughter and she deserved to be at my wedding. Honestly, I was so shocked to see her that my brain just stopped functioning, and I couldn't come up with anything to say to her because this was the first time that I was seeing her as an adult. Seeing how shaken up I was by April's arrival, my husband decided to take over and told the security team to take her away because she wasn't on the guest list and our wedding was no place for her if she wasn't invited. So they escorted a kicking and screaming April out. James and I spent some time alone on the bench outside so that I could process what happened since I was really shocked. I absolutely hadn't been expecting April to show up at any point because she had never expressed any interest in my life ever since the divorce. It took me a while to realize that this was my wedding day and it was about me and James, so it was okay for me to want to celebrate this without making this day about anybody else. After I had pulled myself together, we decided to rejoin all our guests and take my mind off April and her sudden reappearance. We had a really fun day, and by the end of it, I had almost forgotten that April had even showed up at the wedding. But I was reminded of it the very next day when Donald called me for the first time after the divorce to berate me about what my husband had done. He was really pissed off because he believed that James had no right to have her kicked out, especially when this was my wedding that April wanted to attend. He told me that April had showed up at the wedding so she could extend an olive branch and make peace with me, but James had ruined it by having her escorted out. Apparently, she had been really upset and humiliated by what we had done, and Donald believed that I was responsible for it, so James and I owed her an apology. I told him that I wasn't going to apologize because it was my wedding day, and if she wanted to really reach out to me and make things right with me, then she should have done so before and I would have even invited her to the wedding. But the day of my wedding was supposed to be about me and James, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with us kicking her out because we had several valid reasons to do that. The first one was that she had tried to sneak into the wedding, and even when she was caught, she had a really nasty attitude and was acting as though she was entitled to attend a wedding that she hadn't been invited to, instead of just apologizing and dealing with it nicely. So we knew that she hadn't changed, since I had told James all about April and her behavior in the past. I think he judged the situation correctly and made the right call by not letting her in. Also, James and I had planned for months to have a perfect wedding, and the invitation had been sent out several weeks ago, so if she knew where to show up, I was assuming that she had known about the wedding for a really long time. If she had really and truly wanted to make comments with me, then she would have reached out before the day of the wedding instead of leaving it for the very last minute. That was just really suspicious, and it made us feel like she had just been looking for an opportunity to sneak into the wedding and ruin it, and that's why James had not let her in. He had to make that decision on his own. I thought that these were all valid reasons and told Donald that April would just have to deal with her disappointment. He didn't take that well and accused me of being a failure of a mother, so I reminded him that I hadn't been her mother for the past 6 years, thanks to the custody arrangement that they had asked for. I also reminded him that April was the one who had said that I wasn't her mother, and that's the reason why I'd even cut her off. He was the one who had turned her against me, so now he had no right to be mad about the fact that she and I didn't share a relationship of any sort. He got annoyed and hung up on me when I said that, and I thought it was over, but then he got more of his family members to contact me and tell me that I was being a terrible mother. He, along with his entire family, is now accusing me of failing to understand my daughter's feelings, and it's getting to me. James doesn't think that we did anything wrong, but I have started to feel differently, and it's messing with my head. Aita for letting my husband kick my daughter from my previous marriage out of our wedding because she showed up uninvited? Update 1. Hi, so James and I would just like to thank everybody who commented on my original post and made sure that we knew that we were not in the wrong. We have since blocked Donald and everybody who was texting me because I don't need that kind of negative energy in my life, and I don't need to question myself when it comes to my daughter. Honestly, my only regret is that I didn't block Donald a really long time ago. The only reason I didn't do that was that I had always expected that at some point he would reach out to me and tell me that April wanted to speak to me. And well, I guess it kind of happened, but not the way I had expected it would happen. Either way, I don't think that I'm a bad mother because I just decided to put myself first for one day. And it was my wedding day, mind you. It was supposed to be special for me. If April and Donald don't understand that, then, well, tough, because I'm not going to be apologizing to either of them for sure. Now that that's out of the way, I would also just like to touch upon certain things that people had said in the comments of the original post. A couple of people had accused me of abandoning my daughter in the comments, and I would just like to say that I had really fought hard to get custody of April. I think I made it very clear that even after the court order that April was going to stay with her father and I would only get supervised visits, I still tried to see her and get the order reversed. I did everything in my power to have a relationship with April, but she was the one who rejected me, not just once but every single time, and I really don't know what anybody else in my position would have done. I didn't abandon her because she was living with Donald, and she was quite happy without me for the last couple of years. That was very obvious. If she had wanted me in her life, then she could have reached out to me any time, and I would have gladly accepted her back into my life. But the truth of the matter was that she didn't want me back, so she didn't reach out to me. And I know that I'm her mother that should always forgive my daughter, even if she doesn't ask for forgiveness. But I'm also human, so I hope that clears things up because I would hate for anybody to think that I abandoned my daughter. Update 2. So, it's been a week since I got married, and April reached out to me today. But unfortunately, it was not a nice conversation that we had. She texted me in the afternoon and told me that she wanted to speak to me in person, but I was at work, so I told her that I could speak to her once I got off work, and that was enough to make her snap at me. She accused me of not caring about anything apart from my work and myself, which is why I had cut her out of my life in the first place and let her grow up without a mother for all these years. She told me that she had been waiting for me to reach out to her and tell her that I loved her, but it never happened. And even when she decided that she was going to make my wedding day a bit more special as a gesture of peace, I rejected that and let my husband kick her out. She told me that she had expected me to at least apologize to her the day after the wedding and accept that I had made a mistake by kicking her out. But even that didn't happen, and instead, I doubled down and tried to justify my behavior to Donald and the rest of her family. She ended her rant by telling me that she was disappointed by the way that I was treating her, as if she wasn't even my daughter. That remark really got to me because for years I had been fighting for her to be with me, and I knew that Donald was the one who had alienated her from me, so he was the one to blame. But even after she grew up, she didn't think that she owed me an apology, so I kind of lost my cool with her and told her that I had no regrets about what I had done, because I didn't trust her anymore after that scathing and untrue post that she had made against me during the divorce. I had worked hard to salvage my marriage and build a relationship with April when she was younger, but Donald spoiled all of it, and in spite of knowing the truth, she decided to go ahead and make that post against me so she could take her dad's side. That had broken my heart, but I had still persisted and tried to forgive her because she was just a child and she didn't know what she was doing. So I kept trying to reestablish my relationship with her, but she didn't want it and turned me away by telling me that I was not even her mother anymore. I reminded her of that incident and told her how much it had hurt and how depressed I was after that, but she had had no idea about it because she just didn't care about her mother's feelings. In all these years, she hadn't even bothered to contact me even once, and I couldn't forget that. Even on the day of my wedding, she showed up and made the day all about herself without bothering to think about how it would make me feel. I told her that if she had truly wanted to reconnect with me, then she had the opportunity to do so before, but she chose the day of my wedding because she didn't even think about how I would take it. I told her she had grown up to be just as selfish and entitled as her father, and I wasn't going to speak to her until she decided to change because I was done dealing with the two of them. I had divorced Donald several years ago already, but I had still been willing to hold out hope that April wouldn't turn out to be like her father. Clearly, I had been wrong, and she was just like him. I told her she could reach out to me once she was ready to apologize, but until then, I had nothing to say to her, and I didn't want to hear from her. I didn't give her a chance to continue the argument and disconnected the call immediately after I was done speaking. It didn't feel as good as I thought it would, and I almost called her back to take back everything that I had said because even though we were fighting, it felt nice since at least now she was talking to me and not pretending that I didn't even exist. It's weird, but that's how it is. Update 3. A couple of days have passed since April last called me. Honestly, I had expected her to reach out to me sooner, but it hasn't happened yet. I am a little disappointed that she hasn't contacted me yet, but there's not much that I can do, so I'm just trying to manage my disappointment by spending more time with James and planning our honeymoon, which we are supposed to leave for in a couple of days. James thinks that if we are meant to work things out, then April will reach out to me before that. So I really am keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that she calls me before the honeymoon begins. But Donald has tried to reach out to me, and obviously, whenever he tries to talk to me, it's never good news. He showed up at my office the day after I spoke to April on the phone, but I refused to speak to him, so instead of leaving like a normal human being, he decided to shout and tell me that I needed to cut ties with April instead of trying to manipulate her into going against him. He also told me that the reason that she was just like him was because he was the one who had raised her while I was off romancing other men. That was way out of line, and he had no right to say that, so I turned around at that point and told him that I would call the cops and report him for stalking if he ever showed up anywhere near me again. I was sick of him thinking that he could say whatever he wanted and get away with it, and I wanted to scare him bad enough for him to stay away from me since I'd had enough of his BS. So I told him that I would call the cops if he didn't leave, and he thought that I was bluffing until I brought out my phone and told him that I had already dialed the numbers. All I had to do was make the call, and he would be in really big trouble. I could see on his face that he didn't want to leave because he didn't want to appear weak, but after weighing the odds in his head, he decided to get into his car and drive away. Good for him, honestly, because I really would have called the cops if he didn't leave me alone. When I told James about it, he suggested getting a protective order against him, and I'd love to, but I don't know if we have grounds for it just yet. We have spoken to a lawyer just in case we need it in the future, but right now we're not doing anything because I don't think he poses an actual threat yet. He is weak and stupid, and I'm not scared of him in the slightest if I'm being honest. Update 4. Hi. So there are just 2 days to go before James and I leave for our honeymoon, and April finally got in touch with me today. I honestly couldn't be happier about it because things worked out exactly as I had expected them to. Not only did she reach out to me, but she actually apologized to me this time and said that she had been a horrible person for the past 6 years. She acknowledged the fact that she had been her father's daughter all these years, but after speaking to me on the phone that day, she had done a considerable amount of soul-searching and realized that she had made a mistake. She had tried to speak to Donald about it, but his reaction just proved what she had been afraid of. That he had been misleading her all along and alienating her from me for his own gain because he wanted to get back at me for the divorce. They got into a big fight on the day of our phone call in the evening, and I suppose that's why Donald showed up at my office the next day to berate me. But after that, April had been thinking about the way that she had been behaving with me and figured out that the way that I had reacted to her showing up at my wedding had been completely normal because I obviously didn't trust her the way that I used to, and she had nobody else to blame for it but herself because she hadn't even apologized to me. She had realized that she made a terrible mistake, so now she wanted to set things right with me and make sure that she didn't waste any more of the time that we had together. It was a really emotional conversation, and we decided to meet each other in person tomorrow, and she even told me to bring James along because she felt like she owed him an apology as well. So we're getting together for lunch tomorrow, and I really hope that it goes well. Update 5. So James and I just returned from our lunch with April an hour ago, and it was surreal because it felt like we were finally catching up on the time that we had lost, and I had never even thought that this could happen. It was kind of emotional in the beginning, and then after the apologies and stuff were out of the way, we started speaking to each other about everything that had been happening in our lives. It was quite fun to hear her talk about her time in college, and then we shared the story of how James and I had met. We actually had a really nice time, and we have decided that we are going to meet for either lunch or coffee once a week, at the very least, along with therapy. This is going to be quite a shock for Donald, but April told me she doesn't care about it anymore, and I'm really looking forward to fixing our relationship. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Dad made Golden Child's son the owner of the company instead of me, so I quit and started my own business. 6 months later, they begged for help after the nephew committed fraud. 6 months back, I quit working for my dad after he decided to name my nephew, Jack, as the CEO instead of me after I had dedicated the past 12 years of my life to growing and expanding this business. My dad was a realtor, and when I was 25, he started his own firm. I quit my job and started working for him then, hoping to inherit the business at some point. I also have an older sister, but she never really took an interest in the business, so I thought that it was a given that after my dad retired, he would name me as a successor. I know the business inside out, I know all our dealings and clients, and I can say with full confidence that there is literally no better candidate for the CEO position than me. But I don't know why. For some reason, my parents seem to have lost their minds, or maybe it's my sister pulling the strings. Anyway, 6 months back, they made the announcement that my dad was going to be retiring in a couple of months, and they were handing over the business to their darling grandson, who had recently graduated from business school. They made this announcement at my dad's 62nd birthday party, and I was heartbroken, but I didn't throw a tantrum. I just privately confronted my father after the party, and when he told me that he was serious about this, I decided to quit on the spot. I resigned officially a couple of days later, and since then, I have had no contact with my entire family. Didn't go down easy. My parents were very upset with me for quitting and they tried to get me to stay, but I just had one condition. They were either going to take back what they had said about Jack being the next CEO and give me that position, or I was not going to speak to them ever again because it was humiliating. There was no way that I was going to be working under my nephew. The guy is literally just 22 and I have dedicated 12 years of my life to this company, so I was not going down without a fight, and I stood my ground. Even though they tried their best to emotionally manipulate me, I didn't budge, and eventually, they stopped trying to get through to me. It hurt for a really long time, but they were beyond help anyway. They believed that Jack was going to be just as smart as his mother, and because he had good grades in college, they thought that he was a bright kid and would take the business to new heights. They wanted me to continue working with them as a mentor to Jack as he took over, so it would make the whole process easier and he would learn the ropes more quickly while my dad got some well-deserved rest after working for so many years. I was not having it, though, and in hindsight, I'm pretty sure I did the right thing because right now they have been taken to court for financial fraud, and it's all because of their darling grandson. I'm not going to go into the details of what exactly he did, but he fudged some numbers and that's how we got here. In the past 6 months, he has managed to screw everything up pretty colossally, and a few days back, my parents finally showed up at my door begging me to help them out. But I made it very clear to them that right now I want nothing to do with them. As a matter of fact, I've already started working on a business model. I intend on starting my own company since I have some money set aside and my wife is working too, so it's not a concern. But my family thinks that I'm being heartless by refusing to come back to them and help them out, and they have a problem with the way I behaved with them when they showed up at my door. They think that I was a little too crude in dealing with them, so that's what I'm here about. For context, when they had shown up, I had invited them in, but I already had my mind made up before they even got to talking. I knew for a fact that whatever they were going to say or request me to do, I was going to decline because of their oddly nice behavior and sudden reappearance. I had already guessed that maybe they wanted me to rejoin, and then they explained the situation to me, told me that they needed me to bail them out. There, after hearing the situation, I was even more sure that I did not want anything to do with them at this point. So I told them that I was really sorry that this was happening to them, but they definitely deserved this because they had made the biggest mistake of their life when they had handed over the control of the company to Jack instead of me. He was too young and inexperienced, and clearly, it has been a bad call for them to hire him in such an important position. But even then, my parents were not willing to admit their mistake and were acting as if Jack was just under a lot of pressure, which is why he felt desperate to prove himself and it ended up resorting to unethical means, and other than that, he was a good kid with a bright future, and if he hadn't felt pressured, he would have actually put his intelligence to good use. I was just shocked that they were still getting defensive and trying to justify his behavior, claiming that he was a good kid and that he was clever and whatever. So I ended up losing my temper at one point, and I snapped at them and said a lot of things about them, my sister and Jack, that I kind of regret. I ended up taunting them about how they had said that Jack was a smart kid in the beginning too, and now it was his smart decision that had brought them to this position. Just to be clear, the reason they had said that Jack was a smart kid just like his mother was because both of them happened to graduate at the top of their class. That makes them book smart, sure, but I don't think it's the same as 12 years of experience. And if I'm being honest, the only smart thing that my sister has ever really accomplished in her life was getting knocked up at 20 by her extremely rich boyfriend, getting married to him after graduation, and then living off of his alimony and child support. With that money, she founded her scammy astrology and tarot business, but I guess her rich, dumb friends actually buy into that BS, so she's doing well for herself. Anyway, I wouldn't call any of that smart, and my parents were actually delusional if they thought that my sister was intelligent because she had managed to stay on her own 2 feet this way. but using that as a reason to deduce that maybe her son would be equally as smart and hand over the control of the company to him. There was nobody else I could blame in that situation apart from my parents. Of course, Jack was an idiot. He had grown up spoiled and was a total brat for as long as I have known him. My parents should have known better than letting him take over instead of me. So I called them ungrateful because I had dedicated a lot of time and hard work in the company, and my sister had hardly ever even taken interest. I just put them on blast that day when they showed up. I didn't hold back at all on everything that I have just said. I put it all out. They just heard me out quietly and then they left without saying anything else. I thought that would be it, but then my sister and the rest of the family started texting me, telling me that whatever I had said was quite out of line. They told me that it was fine for me to be angry and upset with my parents, but they believed that I had made a lot of personal comments against my parents and my sister and they didn't think that it was okay. So they felt like I had to apologize to them. My sister has even said that she thinks it would be better for me to apologize as well as come back to the company and try and salvage the situation because, after all, we still are family. I'm obviously not planning on going back, but I do feel kind of bad about the comments I made, since in this post I've put it pretty politely, but I did not say it the same way to them and I know that I was very petty. But I also don't think that I need to apologize to them for that, to be honest. So, AITA for taunting and being disrespectful to my family when they came to me for help after 6 months of no contact? Update 1. Hello guys. So thank you so much to everybody who responded with NTA and gave me advice on how to go ahead with the situation. I'm just not going to entertain these people at all now. Definitely not my parents and sister, and since my extended family seems to be on their side, I'm not going to be speaking to them either. I'm completely fine with it as well because it's not like I'm very close to any of them. I think from the way that I spoke about them in my post, it has become pretty clear that I do have a lot of built-up resentment against my parents and sister. My sister, of course, because I never really got along with her, and just because she was a bright student when she was younger, my parents always seemed to think that she was the intellectual in the family. Even before making business decisions, they consult her first and then me, and it's a small, petty thing, but it used to bother me a lot. I just used to console myself by telling myself that eventually, the company was going to come to me and not her. That also turned out to be a bust, and I guess that's why I ended up losing control over my temper that day with my parents, but I really don't feel bad about it. After what they did by replacing me with my 22-year-old nephew, I don't think they deserve my kindness. Also, I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure that my sister must have had a hand in it. I'm not sure of it and it's just a shot in the dark, but I wouldn't be surprised if I found out that it was true. Anyway, the bottom line is that I have decided not to stay in touch with these people for the past 6 months. I have anyway, and I think it's going to be pretty easy for me not to speak to them in the future as well. My wife also thinks that I'm doing the right thing, and that's all that matters to me. She heard me yelling at my parents the other day and she had heard everything that I had said, and while she did agree that I had made a lot of comments and had been very disrespectful, she told me that it was fine because my family had disrespected me first. The act of publicly handing over the control of the company to Jack at the party, who was so much younger than me and had no prior experience, was a slap in the face for me, and she's glad that I didn't let it slide. And frankly speaking, so am I. Also, when they approached me to help them out, they had basically mostly been asking me to navigate the situation with their clients, since they had been losing clients left, right, and center thanks to the whole debacle with Jack, and I had obviously not been happy about them asking me to help. But the decision to come to me had given me an idea, and I'm going to put it into action. I have decided that I'm going to reach out to their clients personally because all it was I who used to handle these accounts. All the high-profile clients were mine, and I'm pretty sure that if I try, I can get them to come on board with me. Right now, it's just me. I don't even have a proper business model or a team or an office, but I'm confident that this time I'll be able to build it all up by myself, and I had a good professional and personal relationship with these people too. I'm sure that they'll help me out. It's going to be a little mean for me to try and get my parents' clients to come on board with me, but given the situation, I think it's worth a try. I'm already prepared for the backlash. I know they are not going to let it go if they find out about it, but I have to look out for myself too. While I am at it, I'm also going to try and get through to a couple of employees who are still working there. I do have the contact info of all these people anyway. I think it will be worth doing, and maybe through the whole word-of-mouth thing, I'll be able to get started with my business a lot quicker than I planned. My wife is already coming on board as an investor, and of course my own money is also going into this as well. I've also spoken to a couple of friends of mine who have been interested, so I'm quite confident about the future. Update 2. Hello guys, so a couple of days have passed since my last update, and I did what I said I would do. I reached out to clients from the past and also spoke to a couple of employees, and I've been lucky enough to receive positive responses from most people. In fact, some of the employees that I spoke to told me that they had already quit working at my dad's company after Jack took over and were in between jobs at the moment. Apparently, the work environment had also become quite chaotic and management was not doing a good job after I quit. So they didn't see the point of staying on in a company like this. Anyway, I was really happy to hear that, not because my dad's company started facing the consequences of passing me over in favor of Jack, but just because even the employees realized that I was the best fit for the CEO position. They were quite excited to hear from me. They told me that they would be ready to start work whenever I wanted them to, and I'm very happy about that. Even my previous clients, when I spoke to them, they seemed very happy to hear from me and told me that they were ready to make the switch. I had thought that I would maybe need to convince them, but I guess Jack and my father did all the convincing with their incompetence after I left. So even without a proper business or team right now, I'm still doing pretty well, and this was just a boost of motivation that I needed. Here on, there is just no looking back for me. Update 3. Hi everyone. So it's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I guess my family finally found the time to confront me. I'm not sure how exactly they found out, but they did figure out eventually that I'm approaching their previous clients and even some employees to join me. I've made a lot of progress in my business so far and I've been pretty busy, so I hadn't been able to post this update when it happened. Anyway, 5 days back, they showed up at my house and started screaming at me, and by they, I'm not just referring to my parents like last time, I'm talking about my entire family. Even Jack was here for some reason, though he didn't say anything. I don't think he wanted to be here but just showed up because his mother asked him to because the entire time he just looked really exhausted and embarrassed. Anyway, when I realized that it was my family outside the door, I decided not to entertain them and considered ignoring them until they left on their own. At first, my wife and I pretended that we were not even home, but I guess they are not as stupid as we think because they figured out that we were at home since our car was in the driveway. They started yelling about how I was poaching clients from them and how they were going to sue me. I would only wish them luck with that because in my contract with them, I didn't have a non-compete clause, so I don't know on what basis they were going to sue me. I didn't reply to them, though. I thought I would just let it go and they would eventually tire themselves out after screaming. But a while later my mom started wailing like a banshee and it got me panicking because she really sounded affected. I can deal with angry folks, but that's not a problem for me because it doesn't soften my feelings towards them. But when people start crying, that's an issue for me because it makes me feel bad for them, and I have to admit I'm easy to manipulate that way. So as soon as I heard her sobbing outside my door like that so loudly, I felt kind of bad, which is why I decided that I would just confront them and then let it go. If they wanted a response from me, I would give them that and end the whole thing. As soon as I opened the door, I realized that I had made a mistake because my mom immediately grabbed me by the arm and started screaming at my face. She was still sobbing, but she was also pretty mad. It was actually kind of scary, and while I was trying to process what was going on, she was just screaming in my face about how I was crippling the family business with my antics and how this is not something that she had expected me to do since it was pretty selfish and ruthless. She seemed kind of insane at that moment, so I was very shocked and it took me a couple of seconds to have her unhand me, but I shook myself free and by then, I was also pretty angry because of their behavior. I didn't want to engage with them even more than I already had, so I decided to tell them to get off my property because otherwise, I would be calling the cops. My wife was standing right behind me in the doorway and she had her phone with her, so they knew that we were serious. So my dad got my mom to back off because she was acting totally unhinged, and he tried to speak to me reasonably. He was not screaming. He just held my hands and started telling me that he knew that he had screwed up and that even now, they were behaving quite badly with me. But they wanted me to understand that this was coming from a place of frustration. The court was not looking too kindly at Jack's situation and the company was also suffering. And on top of that, I had decided to start stealing their clients and employees. Naturally, they were quite upset about the whole thing and it was coming out in ugly ways, but at the end of the day, he wanted me to know that we were family. And he reminded me that while he had dedicated a lot of his time and hard work to his company, so had I had been there with him right from the beginning. The company belongs to me just as much as it belongs to him. His voice was pretty desperate, and I could tell that he was trying to sound like he was about to cry because I guess they know that it's my weakness. It always has been. I just can't handle it when people start crying, and it makes me go soft on them. But I had already made the mistake of entertaining them by opening the door and deciding to confront them. I was not going to make more mistakes. So I told my father that whatever he was saying, it was not true. The company was not mine at all. He had proven that to me when he decided to hand over the control to Jack and make him the CEO instead of me. It was pretty obvious that he did not value me, and that was it for me. I also stood my ground with the whole poaching clients and employees sitch, and I told them that it was fair game. I was just doing what all the other competitors were probably doing as well, and it was not my fault that people had decided to make the switch to me instead. It actually just showed that, if not my family, at least people I had worked with in the past valued me and my efforts, and I was not going to be made to feel guilty about what I was doing because I was just looking out for myself. They had been incredibly disrespectful to me in the past, not valuing my hard work and all the time that I had given to the company, and now they were just having to face the consequences of their own actions. Expecting me to go easy on them just because we were family when they had never shown me the kind of love and respect that you show family was just entitlement at its best, and I told them that I was done talking to them. I didn't want anything to do with them moving forward. They had wanted a response from me, which is why they had shown up, and I had given them exactly what they wanted, but now this is all that I had to say. I was not interested in speaking to them anymore. Before my dad could say anything else, my sister intervened and started cursing at me, telling me that she knew right from the beginning that it would be a terrible idea to try and reason with me because I was just a selfish monster and nothing could be done about the situation because this is who I am as a person, who I have always been. She told our parents that it would be better for everyone to go home because obviously, I can't be reasoned with and I'm too egoistic to even be spoken to anymore. I'm pretty sure that she thought that she was hitting me where it hurts and I was going to feel bad about whatever she was saying, but I was just relieved that they were finally leaving. I could see that my parents were pretty disappointed with how this whole interaction had turned out, but well, it was their own fault. After they left, my wife and I decided that the next time they showed up, we were definitely just going to call the cops instead of interacting with them or even ignoring them. I do regret the fact that I wasted my time by allowing myself to go soft and open the door to speak to them when my mom started crying. If I hadn't done that, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble and drama. Anyway, what's done is done. I can't change that, and I guess somewhere deep down, I think that it was necessary for me to speak to them one last time and get the proper closure that I needed. So I'm good right now. I'm going to continue working and hopefully, I won't have anything to do with my family after this. Fingers crossed. Update 4. The trial is finally beginning this week. From what I heard from a couple of friends who have common friends with my nephew. It's been 4 weeks since my last update, and well, he's young and this is his first offense, so I'm hoping that things work out well for him and he doesn't end up having his future, although I do think that the ship has sailed already. Anyway, I've been approached to testify and I already know what I'm going to say. I'm just going to go with the truth and not going to sugarcoat anything. In the past couple of weeks, my parents have tried to contact me several times through various means, but I've always ended up blocking them. I don't even read what they send me anymore. I don't care what they have to say in their texts and emails. It's always all going to be the same rubbish anyway. I know it. The problem is, I have moved on from whatever happened with my family. I'm only looking out for the future right now, and in the future I'm working for myself and my family is not in the picture, so I intend to keep things this way. I am in a stable position business-wise right now. I've even found a wonderful office space for my company, and we start next week. It's all pretty exciting and I can't wait to start this new chapter of my life. I've already given up 12 years of my life working for people who had no gratitude for me, and I think eventually things worked out for me because if they had made me the CEO, I never would have left and to strike out on my own. But now that I'm building something of my own, there's a very different sense of fulfillment, so in a way, I'm really thankful that my parents made the decision of naming Jack as the future CEO and transferring control of the company to him instead of me. Anyway, I'm going to get back to work now, and I don't think I'm going to be posting any updates for the next couple of weeks, because I'm going to be pretty busy. Thank you so much for reading about my life. Though, it means a lot to me. Update 5. Hey everyone, almost 4 months have passed since my last update, and I was actually reading through my previous updates a couple of hours ago, and I'm so glad that I made the decisions that I did. I'm doing pretty well for myself now. My company has grown, and even though it's not exactly at the place that I would want to be right now, it's still a pretty significant amount of progress considering the fact that it's been a few months since I quit working for my dad and went solo. I think I'm doing exceedingly well for myself. My wife is actually even considering quitting her own job and joining my company so we can work together. And I don't think I've ever been happier. As for Jack, I know that a lot of people must be curious about what happened to him. I testified in court and went with the truth, and since he's really young, this was his first offense and all that stuff, they were quite lenient with him. He got off with just a massive fine and several hours of community service. A lot of people whom I know believe that he should have at least been sentenced to a couple of months, but I would like to differ from them. I think he really does regret whatever he did, and he's just a kid. He was extremely stupid and put in a position where he did not belong. I'm not saying that it can justify what he did, but I really do hope that he learns his lesson from this and tries to do better. Anyway, he's not working with my dad anymore. I don't know what he's doing, but I know that my dad has decided to keep trying to get back on his feet and is still going hard with the business and everything. I'm sure it won't be easy to try and fix everything, especially at this stage of his life when he's supposed to be retiring, but I'm hoping that he does have enough money saved, and if he wants to, he can retire in peace. And speaking of my dad, I also recently found out that I had been right about my sister having a hand in whatever happened with him naming Jack as the CEO instead of me. 2 weeks ago, he sent me an email, but as usual, I marked it as spam and did not even check it. But then he sent a bunch of emails to my wife, and she decided to check them, and she told me that he had basically just apologized to me for everything and said that he himself had wanted to have me as a CEO, but my sister had talked him into naming her son because she wanted to secure his future. And he had made the mistake of agreeing to that because he believed that my sister was always right. She had said that it would be better for me to stay on as a mentor for her son rather than the CEO myself because her son had a business degree and I didn't, and for my parents, my sister's word is as good as the gospel truth. So they went with it, and I'm sure they're regretting it now because I don't think any business degree in the world can replace 12 years of experience. But anyway, the damage has already been done. Although I would say that it worked out pretty well for me because I have my own company now and I'm doing well for myself, so I'm grateful for everything that happened. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My sister claimed that my husband had an affair with her, and my parents believed her. 2 years later, her fiancé found out she was cheating and made up the whole story. It's hard to even know where to begin, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest and, maybe just maybe, find some clarity. I'm sorry if this comes across as a ramble. There's just so much to unpack. Hopefully, you guys could guide me in the right direction because I'm at a loss. I'm 30 years old, and I've been married to the love of my life, Jake, who's 34, for 8 incredible years. We have 2 wonderful children, a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. Life was pretty close to perfect. We had a cozy home, a stable routine, and a deep connection that I thought was unshakable. Our days were filled with the usual ups and downs of family life, but overall, I couldn't have been happier. But everything changed 2 years ago, thanks to my older sister, Lily. Lily is also 34, and while our lives started out similarly, they've taken drastically different paths. Lily's experience with relationships has been, to put it mildly, extremely rocky. Until recently, she had been single for quite a while, and there's a very solid reason behind that. As much as it pains me to say it, Lily is a bit of a red flag when it comes to relationships. Her behavior can only be described as that of a neurotic narcissist. She has a habit of sabotaging her relationships, often pushing people away with her erratic and manipulative tendencies. Lily's relationships always seem to start off well enough, but they sadly never last. She's got this way of getting too intense too quickly, and then things start to unravel. I've seen it happen time and time again. She'll meet someone, they'll start dating, and then she'll start picking fights over the smallest things, or she'll become so possessive that the guy feels suffocated. Before long, it's over, and she's left wondering why she can't find someone who will stick around. It's hard to watch, especially because Lily often takes her frustrations out on me. She'd come over to my place, venting about how she couldn't find a man like Jake, and it was clear that there was a lot of resentment there. She'd say things like, "Even you found a man. Why can't I find someone like Jake?" I tried not to take offense to that because I knew she was in a bad place, but it was hard not to feel like her words were a dig at me. Despite everything, I still love my sister. I've always hoped that she would find the man of her dreams and finally be happy. I even tried to set her up with a friend of Jake's once, thinking they might be a good match. But Lily's strange and off-putting behavior quickly put an end to that idea. She was so intense and controlling that I realized it wasn't worth risking my friendship over her. Yet, despite all of this, I continued to hope that Lily would eventually find happiness. Unfortunately, it became very clear that Lily didn't feel the same way about me. 2 years ago, Jake and I were celebrating our 6th wedding anniversary with a big family barbecue at our parents' house. It had been a while since the whole family had gathered to do something, so everyone was having the time of their lives. Our children were playing with their cousins, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and joy. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt perfect, and I was surrounded by the people I loved most. As the evening wore on, Lily pulled me aside. At first, I thought she was going to give me a heartfelt anniversary wish. She congratulated me, and I thanked her, feeling a bit surprised by her genuine tone. I asked her what she'd been up to lately, knowing that she had a new boyfriend, so I inquired about that as well. But instead of the casual chat I was expecting, Lily's demeanor changed. She looked at me with a strange intensity, and the next words out of her mouth caught me completely off guard. She claimed that after Jake and I got married, they went behind my back and had an affair for a while. At first, I thought it was some twisted joke and even laughed. But no, Lily was dead serious. She said that after the wedding, Jake started texting her, and what began as innocent getting-to-know-you messages soon turned into deep, emotional talks. According to Lily, Jake confided in her that he and I were constantly fighting and arguing over little things. She claimed that he would ask if they could meet, and that's when the affair supposedly began. Her words left me feeling nauseous. The idea of Jake, who had always been devoted to me and our family, being unfaithful was something I couldn't even fathom. Lily said that she had kept this a secret this whole time but could not pretend anymore. But the way she presented it, so calmly and confidently, shook me to my core even more than the actual news. For a second, I started thinking of all the scenarios. Did Jake really cheat on me? That too with my own sister? And now, are we supposed to get separated? What about the kids? It took me a minute to gather my thoughts, but then I asked Lily if she had some proof so that Jake could not get away with lying, and that's where she faltered. Lily said that she definitely had a bunch of evidence, but as her sister, I should trust her with or without that. That was when it hit me. Lily was lying. She could fool Mom and Dad, but I had observed her for years, and I could easily tell by now when she was being dishonest. When she realized that I might be on to her, she started crying. Then came her lecture with stuff like, "I cannot believe you don't trust me," and "I told you for your own good." Lily went ahead and told our parents the same story. Very soon, all of our friends and family circled us, and Lily started screaming at Jake about how he cheated on me with her and, even though she didn't want to be part of anything, he blackmailed her. My husband was confused as well, just like me. He also thought at first that this was some sort of unfunny joke. But when Lily started screaming like a maniac in front of everybody, things became pretty serious. I hoped my parents would help me in doing the damage control. After all, even if Lily's story was true, I would have been the heartbroken one. But to my disbelief, my parents sided with Lily without even caring about our surroundings. Dad started to scream at Jake, saying that he had played with Lily's feelings. I felt abandoned. My own sister was telling me that she had an affair with my husband of 6 years. Even though I knew that it wasn't true, no wife likes to hear this type of stuff. Moreover, had her story been true, my father cared more about Lily's feelings than about me, a wife and mother who would have lost her husband. When we returned home that day, Jake discussed everything with me. I trusted my husband, and I knew he wouldn't betray me like this. Before anybody thinks I'm gullible, let me tell you, Lily has a history of lying. She has sabotaged several of her relationships in the past over petty lies. In fact, the reason why Jake's friend broke up with her was because she would randomly accuse him of cheating on her. She would plant her own stuff at different places in the apartment and then question him if he had brought other girls to his place and then have a screaming match. And when finally he was exhausted, she would tell him that it was just a test. The incident with us just proved this was a pattern for Lily, so I chose to believe my husband. What followed were the worst days of my life. My parents refused to hear our side of the story, choosing instead to believe Lily's version without any evidence. Our once close-knit family was shattered. Jake and I found ourselves isolated, and the atmosphere during family gatherings became unbearable. My parents treated me with cold suspicion, and Jake was outright ignored. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on the chaos she had created. She played the victim, soaking up the attention and sympathy from everyone around her. It was as if she enjoyed seeing the destruction she had caused in my life, and the more I tried to defend myself and Jake, the more she twisted the narrative to make us look like villains. I tried to reach out to my parents to explain that there was no proof of Lily's claims, but it was no use. They had made up their minds, and their loyalty to Lily was unwavering. Mom even accused me of being in denial, of choosing Jake over my own sister, and it broke my heart. I couldn't understand how they could turn their backs on me so easily, how they could believe Lily's lies without question. Eventually, the tension reached a breaking point. Jake and I made the painful decision to distance ourselves from my family for the sake of our mental health and our children's well-being. It was an incredibly difficult choice, but we couldn't continue living under the shadow of such a hurtful lie. After a while, this became our new normal. As I said, it was hard, but not impossible. I accepted the fact that I did not need my parents' approval about everything in my life, and if they want to support Lily's lie, then be that as it may. But just when I thought the drama was finally behind us, something happened that stirred everything up again. Out of the blue, I came across a post on Facebook, and guess what? Lily got engaged. She had posted a series of pictures with her new fiancé, a man named Mark, along with a long, sentimental caption about how she had met the love of her life. She went on to describe how Mark had come into her life during what she claimed was the hardest time she had ever faced. A time of pain and betrayal. Ironic, huh? Reading those words made my stomach churn. The hypocrisy was astounding. Lily had painted herself as a victim, using the very lies she had told to garner sympathy and admiration from our extended family and friends. As I scrolled through the comments, I saw that many of our relatives who had mostly sided with her during the fallout were congratulating her and offering their support. Some even made snarky, passive-aggressive remarks that were clearly aimed at me, saying things like, "Good for you for moving past that toxicity. You don't need that in your life." It was infuriating. These people had no idea what really happened, yet they were quick to applaud Lily for her supposed strength and resilience. I felt a familiar sense of betrayal, not just from Lily but from the entire family that had chosen to believe her lies without question. It was as if they had completely erased me from their lives, all while continuing to support someone who had caused nothing but pain and destruction. But what bothered me even more was the fact that Lily was now engaged to a man who had no idea about the kind of person she really was. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Mark, knowing that he was being manipulated by the same lies that had torn my family apart. I wondered if Lily had ever told him the truth about what she had done, or if she had continued to spin her web of deceit to ensnare him as well. At first, I was tempted to reach out to Mark and warn him, to tell him about the kind of person Lily really was. But I quickly realized that it wasn't my place to interfere in their relationship. Mark would have to learn the truth on his own, just as I had. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that came with knowing Lily was once again manipulating those around her for her own benefit. In the days that followed, I tried to push the news of Lily's engagement out of my mind, but it wasn't easy. Suddenly, I started to notice a string of missed calls from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was just spam, so I didn't pay much attention to it, but the calls kept coming. I was busy with work and the kids, so I didn't have time to pick up. Finally, during a break at work, I decided to answer. What greeted me on the other end of the line was a screaming Lily. She didn't hold back, hurling every insult and slur she could think of at me. It was like a flood of anger and rage, completely unfiltered and unrestrained. I tried to get a word in, to ask her what was going on, but she wouldn't let me speak. It was only after what felt like an eternity of listening to her tirade that I managed to get her to pause long enough to ask what had happened and why she was so angry. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then she screamed, "How could I pretend to be innocent after everything I had done?" Before I could respond, she hung up. I was left in a daze, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind was racing with possibilities, but nothing made any sense. What could I have possibly done to make Lily this furious? I had stayed out of her life, given her the space she clearly wanted, and had done nothing to provoke her. There was only one person I could think of who might have some insight into this situation. My Uncle Tom. He was one of the few family members I was still in touch with, and he had always been a voice of reason in the middle of all the chaos. I called him, hoping that he could shed some light on what was going on. The only person I could think to call was my uncle, the one family member who hadn't turned his back on me during the entire ordeal. He had always been a voice of reason, someone I could rely on for the truth. When I explained what had just happened, he told me what Lily had conveniently left out. Apparently, Mark, her fiancé, had called off the engagement. The reason? He had uncovered the so-called affair between Lily and Jake through the family gossip. Mark, being the decent guy he was, had been doing some digging into a conflict he had noticed between Lily and me. When he learned about the affair, he was understandably furious. The problem was, he didn't know it was all a lie, a fabricated story Lily made up to gain attention and sympathy. Things took an even more dramatic turn shortly before the engagement was called off. Mark, Lily's fiancé, had been sensing that something was off in their relationship. Lily's erratic behavior had raised some red flags for him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Driven by his suspicions, Mark decided to check Lily's phone. What he discovered was a shock to everyone. Lily had been cheating on him. She had been meeting up with this guy she met on a dating app, and let's just say the conversations weren't just friendly banter. Mark, who was well off and seemingly perfect in Lily's eyes, was someone she wasn't willing to lose. Lily had no choice but to come clean. She confessed to Mark that there was no affair with Jake, that it was all a story she had made up. But instead of salvaging her relationship, her confession backfired. She did not deny the chats with the guy on the dating app. Mark was horrified, of course, by the affair, but also by the lie, the lengths Lily had gone to in order to maintain the act. It painted Lily in an even darker light, and Mark wanted nothing to do with her after that. In the aftermath of Mark calling off the engagement, Lily's life began to unravel. Her lies were now public knowledge, and the very people who had once supported her started to distance themselves. The relatives who had been so quick to believe her story about Jake and me now questioned everything. Their snarky comments and supportive messages vanished as they realized the depth of Lily's deception. My parents, who had so easily taken her side 2 years ago, were left reeling from the truth. They had been manipulated just like everyone else, and now they had to face the consequences of their blind faith in Lily's lies. Now, all of my family is trying to reconcile with me and my husband. Even after everything that's happened, there's a part of me that feels guilty. Maybe it's because in my anger and hurt, I haven't spoken to Lily or my parents since the engagement was called off. I didn't reach out to see how Lily was doing after Mark left her. She's my sister, and despite everything, I still feel some responsibility for her well-being. I know she brought this on herself, but it's hard to shake the feeling that I should have done more, even if just to check in. Another part of me feels guilty for keeping my children away from their grandparents. They don't know the full story, of course, but they've started asking questions about why we don't visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore. They miss them, and it breaks my heart to see them so confused. But how can I expose them to people who sided with a lie that nearly destroyed our family? So, I'm left wondering, Ida for cutting my family off and not reaching out to Lily even after her engagement fell apart? Should I have done more to mend the broken relationships? Or am I justified in keeping my distance to protect myself and my family? Update 1. Hi guys, how are you? It's been a while since the whole ordeal with Lily and Mark, and while things have mostly returned to normal, there's still some tension that I can't seem to shake. After the truth came out and Lily's engagement was called off, I thought we'd finally be able to move on. But now it seems like everyone in my family is trying to reach out to us, as if they suddenly realized the gravity of what they believed and the damage it caused. My aunts and cousins, who were quick to take Lily's side when she accused Jake of cheating, have started calling and texting me regularly. They're all expressing their regret for doubting Jake and me, saying things like, "We should have known better," or "We never should have believed it without hearing your side." Part of me wants to believe their sincerity, but another part of me feels like it's too little, too late. Where were they when we needed their support? My parents, of course, have been the most persistent. They've been calling and leaving voicemails almost every day, and it's clear they're desperate to reconcile. They've even shown up at our house a couple of times unannounced. But Jake and I didn't answer the door. I finally picked up my mom's call once, thinking maybe I was ready to hear her out. But the first thing she said was how much she missed her grandchildren and how she couldn't wait to see them again. That really hit a nerve. The fact that her primary concern was seeing our kids rather than acknowledging the pain Jake and I went through because of her blind belief in Lily's lies angered me. It felt like she was more interested in getting back what she lost, the relationship with our children, than truly making amends for the hurt they caused. The motive to reach out should have been an apology, a genuine acknowledgement of the harm they did to our family, especially to Jake, who had been dragged through the mud by their accusations. In the meantime, I received a message from Mark, Lily's ex-fiancé, through Instagram. I was a bit surprised to hear from him, but we ended up having a nice chat. Mark was incredibly apologetic about everything that happened, expressing his regret for not speaking up sooner when Lily made her accusations. He told me that he had believed something was off but didn't want to make waves or hurt anyone more than necessary. It was clear that breaking things off with Lily had hit him hard too. He mentioned that he had genuinely cared for her and had hoped their relationship would work out. But how could he spend his life with someone who was just straight up a con woman? I assured Mark that he did the right thing by breaking off the engagement and that he would eventually meet someone better who wouldn't put him through what Lily did. I could tell he was still processing everything, and I sympathized with him. After all, he was another victim of Lily's manipulations. Interestingly, while my family has been trying to reconnect with us, Lily has gone completely MIA. After the big reveal at the engagement party, she seemed to dig herself into an even deeper hole. She tried to throw out more wild accusations, claiming that I had cheated on Jake and that he had always secretly wanted her instead. But honestly, by that point, no one was listening. It was as if everyone had finally seen through her lies and manipulations. I wasn't even surprised by the things she said anymore. Instead, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was upset and sad for Lily because it was clear that she needed some serious help. No sane person would continue down this path of self-destruction. On the other hand, I felt a sense of relief that my husband wasn't being seen as a cheater and I as a stupid woman. Despite the guilt and sorrow I feel for my sister, I know that the best thing for my family right now is to keep our distance from all this toxic drama. We've been through enough, and I need to focus on protecting my husband, my children, and myself from further harm. I'm grateful for the clarity that's come out of all this, even if it's been incredibly painful to get here. I also want to thank everyone who took the time to read my story and offer their support and suggestions. It's been a difficult journey, but the kindness and understanding I've received from strangers has made it a little easier to bear. I am grateful to you all for helping me see things more clearly and for giving me the strength to do what's best for my family. Update 2. Hi everyone. The past week has been incredibly rocky, so my family and I decided to take a much-needed mini-vacation. It was a good way to clear our minds and focus on each other after everything that's happened. I also took some time to go through all of your comments on my previous posts, and I just want to say thank you. Your insights and support have really given me a better perspective on this whole situation. One thing that really stood out to me was the number of comments about Lily's strange obsession with my husband, Jake. Now that you all have pointed it out, I can see that there were always signs, but I just didn't connect the dots back then. When Jake and I first started dating, Lily had a lot to say about it, more than I realized at the time. She would always call him smart and dashing, which seemed like harmless compliments, but they were often followed by comments that now feel a bit off, like how I managed to get him, or how he was so out of my league. I shrugged it off as her usual teasing, but looking back, there might have been more to it. Anyway, moving forward, I have to mention that my parents have not stopped trying to contact us. They've given us hundreds of calls and texts, and while I'm still angry about what happened, I've decided to let them visit us. I know their primary motive is to see the kids, and I've come to terms with that. After everything, I've realized that I won't deprive my children of their grandparents, even if I'm not ready to fully reconcile with them myself. The truth is, while my parents may not have been the best at supporting me, they've always been loving grandparents, and my kids adore them. The visit isn't going to be easy, and I'm still not sure how I'll handle seeing them face to face after all that's happened. But for the sake of my children, I'm willing to give it a try. I'll make sure to set boundaries and protect my own mental health, but I can't deny that bond they share with their grandparents. Hopefully, this visit will provide some clarity on how to move forward from here. Thank you again for all your support and advice. I'll keep you posted on how things go. Update 3. Hello, people. Hope you're doing better. I wanted to give you all an update on how things have been since my last post. My parents did end up visiting us, and while I was nervous about how it would go, I have to say it was better than I expected. Things were awkward at first, as I had anticipated, but my kids quickly broke the ice. They were beyond happy to see their grandparents again, and their excitement helped to lift the tension in the room. It was clear they had missed them just as much as my parents had missed them. As we settled in, the kids, in their innocent way, asked where Aunt Lily was. It was a question I knew would come up eventually, and it brought a moment of uncomfortable silence. We all kind of avoided the topic at the time, trying to keep the mood light, but later, when the kids were busy, I decided to ask my parents directly where she was. They told me that Lily was back at their place after disappearing for a while, and that she wanted to apologize to me. I found it hard to take that seriously, though. After everything she's done, an apology felt somewhat meaningless. Moreover, Mark, her fiancé, was the one who deserved the biggest apology after everything she had put him through. I suggested that, instead of wasting time on apologizing, they should consider getting her into therapy. The way she acted, lying so blatantly and destructively, wasn't just a simple mistake. She behaved like a pathological liar, and at times it seemed she was inches away from being considered a psychopath. Some might say she is one. If there's any chance of her recovering from this situation, professional help is essential. Interestingly, throughout this whole ordeal, Jake and Mark have fostered a surprising friendship. They started hanging out and discovered that they shared a lot of similar interests. Jake keeps Mark updated about what's happening with us, and it's been nice to see them both support each other in different ways. Mark, being the mature guy that he is, has started to move forward with his life. He didn't deserve what he went through, but that's all we can do as humans. Move on and try to find peace. All in all, I think we're on a path towards some kind of resolution. Things won't ever be the same, but I'm a tiny bit optimistic that they can get better. If the universe works in our favor, we might not return to the way things were, but we could reach a place that's good enough. A place where we can rebuild some trust and move forward without the weight of the past holding us back. We've learned valuable lessons about the importance of open communication, the dangers of jumping to conclusions, and the power of forgiveness, both giving and receiving it. While we're not fully healed yet, we feel we're on the right path. Thank you again, Reddit, for your support and advice throughout this challenging time. Your perspectives have been invaluable in helping us navigate this complex situation. We'll continue to take things one day at a time, prioritizing our mental health and the well-being of our children as we move forward. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My family favored my sister and ignored me at her wedding, but at mine, she reconciled by gifting me our grandmother's heirloom bracelet. As a 42-year-old who has struggled with complicated family matters for as long as I can remember, I believe the time has come to tell my tale. To put it mildly, my relationship with my 38-year-old younger sister has never been easy. I've always felt like I was playing second fiddle in my own family, and it's obvious that our parents have always preferred her above me. Almost every element of my life, including my relationships, professional decisions, and even sense of self-worth, has been influenced by this emotion. My sister was the center of my parents' attention from an early age. I was more introverted and, to be honest, lonely, but she was always the gregarious, popular one. I very well recall the celebration for my 10th birthday. Only a few of the students who were invited by my parents came up. My sister, who was only 6 at the time, managed to steal the show and keep everyone entertained with her antics. When I stealthily went away to my room, holding back tears, my parents hardly noticed because they were so preoccupied with her. I was merely there, at school, while my sister was the life of the party. "Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister?" is something I've heard more times than I can count. "And your sister is so lively, why aren't you?" These comparisons never stopped, gradually eroding my sense of self-worth. I began to think that there must be a problem with me, that just because I wasn't like my sister, I wasn't good enough. The preference only became more obvious as we got older. I made a valiant attempt to forge my own professional path, but my parents never seemed to appreciate it. It has always been, "You should network more like your sister," or, "If you were as charming as your sister, you'd get promoted faster." Every achievement I made was compared to my sister's, and they always thought I fell short. I gave my best to my work in the hopes that my parents would eventually recognize my value if I could just achieve enough success. As I advanced in my job, I gave up my personal life to work late into the night and on the weekends. I recall working 80-hour weeks for months on end on one particularly taxing job. I was thrilled to contact my parents to tell them that I had finally gotten a significant client for my business. How did they react? "Oh, sweetheart, that's lovely. Have we informed you of your sister's recent employment? It will be 6 digits for her." That was always the case. It was never enough for them, no matter how high I climbed. In contrast, my sister managed to get by on her charm and the steadfast backing of our parents. Please understand that I adore my sister. She is not a nasty person, and I am aware that our parents' different treatment of us is not her fault. However, it might be difficult to avoid feeling bitter at times, particularly when she appears unaware of the privileged treatment she receives. My sister got married last month. It would be an understatement to say that our parents were ecstatic. They dedicated a large portion of their cash, as well as their hearts and souls, to organizing the wedding. I thought it may be an opportunity for us to strengthen our family ties, so I offered to assist with the preparation, but I was graciously turned down at every stage. "Oh, you're so busy with work, we wouldn't want to bother you," they'd reply. In actuality, though, they didn't want me to get involved. I made an effort to be upbeat, telling myself that it wasn't about me and that it was my sister's big day. However, I began to feel increasingly alienated from my own family as the wedding day drew near. When I learned that my parents had asked my sister's best friend to be her maid of honor without even taking me into consideration, it was the last straw. My mother simply remarked, "Well, you're not really the maid of honor type, are you?" when I challenged them about it. "We believe that a lower function would better suit you." The actual wedding day was challenging. My sister was praised throughout our parents' remarks, which included stories about her early years and their pride in the lady she had grown into. Not a word about me was said. They acted as though I didn't exist and that the 3 of them made up their entire family. On the inside, I felt like I was crumbling, but I sat there trying to smile. I heard my mother speaking to one of her friends after the wedding. "So relieved," she remarked. "We were worried we might never get to experience a wedding day like this." It was obvious that they didn't believe I would ever get married. The worst was still to come, but it felt like a kick to the belly. My mother drew me aside later that night. I briefly entertained the idea that she may express regret for not including me in the remarks. Rather, she said something that will always stick in my memory. "Don't stress about your wedding. Since this might be the only one we get to plan, we put our all into it. We wanted to ensure that we did it correctly." Something broke inside of me at that very instant. All of the years I had spent feeling inferior and attempting to get their acceptance came tumbling down. However, it also seemed as though a fog had dissipated. I realized for the first time just how poisonous our family dynamic had become. The problem is that I'm not some lonesome spinster that they should be concerned about. 39M, my amazing fiancé, believes in me and loves me for who I am, not what he believes I should be. He has supported me through all of this family dysfunction over our 2 years of dating. It was him who persuaded me to go to therapy and begin addressing my problems with self-esteem. 3 years ago, I met my fiancé during a seminar at work. I was reluctant to let him in at first. I'd been scared of partnerships for years because I felt unworthy. However, He was gentle and patient, gradually dismantling the barriers I had put up around myself. I can still clearly recall the instant I knew I was falling for him. As we spent a peaceful evening together, I told him about a challenging workday. He simply listened without trying to solve problems or make things better. Then he said, "You realize how wonderful you are. You are amazing in the way you approach problems and the way you take pride in your job." I felt genuinely noticed and valued for who I am for the first time in my life. All of this familial drama has been greatly supported by my fiancé. He has comforted me when I've sobbed following tough phone conversations with my parents. He has urged me to put my own mental health first and to establish limits first. Furthermore, he has never made me feel inadequate or likened me to my sister. Since college 41F, my incredible best friend has been by my side. When I'm feeling overwhelmed by self-doubt, she's always there to remind me of my strengths. She repeatedly reassured me that I deserved more while holding me while I sobbed after the wedding. In my life, our connection has consistently provided encouragement and affirmation. She has witnessed my darkest moments and has never passed judgment on my difficulties with my family. Rather, she has consistently provided me with a sympathetic ear, a shoulder to weep on, and occasionally, a harsh reality check when I begin to internalize my parents' criticism. Building a life away from the influence of my family has also been greatly aided by my best buddy. She is the one who inspired me to follow interests and pastimes that I find enjoyable, even if they don't align with my parents' preferences. Because of her, I've developed a love for painting, which I never would have attempted if my only goal had been to please my parents. For me, these painting sessions have turned into a kind of therapy, where I can release feelings that I've suppressed for years. I'm currently working to take back my life and my self-esteem. I'm attempting to strengthen my sense of self while in treatment and healing from years of emotional neglect. It's not simple. On some days, I can still hear my parents' judgmental voices telling me that I'm not good enough. However, I'm learning to confront those ideas and remind myself of my own value and potential. My fiancé and I are discussing our own wedding plans, which will be small and personal and accurately represent who we are as a pair. It's thrilling, but it also evokes a wide range of complex feelings. To show my parents that I'm deserving of a celebration, I secretly hope to have the lavish wedding my sister had. However, I'm making an effort to remind myself that this day should be about me and my fiancé, not about giving my family proof of anything. I'm also trying to figure out why my sister and I are treated so differently by our parents in therapy. According to my therapist, my parents' actions may be a result of their own fears and unmet expectations. With her gregarious demeanor and social success, my sister might be the embodiment of everything they've always wanted to be. They might be reminded of their own perceived shortcomings by my more reserved demeanor and emphasis on professional achievement. This lets me see them as flawed people rather than as all-powerful people whose approval I must gain, even while it doesn't justify their actions. However, I'm having trouble deciding how to proceed with my family. I want to completely cut them off in order to shield myself from more harm. I also harbor the hope that we might be able to mend our friendship. However, I'm not really sure where to begin. I've considered going up to them and telling them how they've harmed me over the years, but I'm scared they'll just brush it off as they always do. Even worse, they'll reverse it and blame me for my sister's success, saying that I'm the issue because I'm too sensitive or envious. According to my fiancé, I ought to offer them one final opportunity to get together and discuss our relationship openly. He thinks there's a chance they would realize and desire to change if I can articulate how their actions have affected me. He has volunteered to support me by being present if I choose to have this chat. However, my best friend believes that I should put my own recovery first and avoid them, at least for the time being. She fears that attempting to mend the relationship before I've resolved my personal problems completely could hinder my advancement. Instead, she said I might want to write them a letter to describe how I feel without having to respond right away. I'm conflicted. They are my family on the one hand. A part of me still yearns for their affection and acceptance, in spite of everything. There are both pleasant and painful memories in me, such as my mom consoling me after my first heartbreak and my dad teaching me how to ride a bike. I question whether it's worth struggling for those moments of connection. However, I'm worn out after years of trying to live up to their expectations only to be ignored and underappreciated all the time. I'm concerned that if I keep talking to them, I might not be able to get well and go on with my life. Additionally, I fear that my future children will experience the same suffering and insecurity that I have. As I type this, I'm aware that I've never really put all of these emotions into words before. It is both overpowering and somewhat freeing. I've devoted a significant portion of my life to attempting to fulfill the expectations of my parents. I'm now at last beginning to understand who I am and what I desire. I'm looking to you, Reddit, for guidance. How would you respond if I were you? How can I handle this complicated familial situation? Should I concentrate on starting a new family with my fiancé and friends who genuinely care about me? Or is there any chance that we may mend our relationship? If any of you have experienced comparable circumstances, how did you respond? Was it best for you to keep your distance from your family? Or were you able to mend your relationship with them? How did you handle the guilt and the pressure from society to keep family ties intact if you did remove yourself? I appreciate you reading this far. I realize it was lengthy. Finally sharing something with someone, even if they are only complete strangers you met online, feels nice. I would be very grateful for any guidance or words of encouragement. I feel like I'm at a fork in the road and don't know which way to go. However, I am aware that I cannot stay in this state of uncertainty and keep looking for unfulfilled acceptance. A change is needed, but I'm not clear what that modification should entail. Update 1. 2 months have passed since my last post, and I wanted to give you all an update on what has been going on. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who read my tale and gave me advice. Your assistance has been priceless. The most significant shift has been in how I see myself. I've been going to therapy regularly, and my self-esteem is really improving. I'm working through years of emotional maltreatment and continual comparison to my sister with the support of my therapist. Although it's challenging, I'm coming to value myself regardless of my family's opinion. It has been beneficial to keep a wins journal. I jot down one accomplishment, no matter how minor, every day. I'm gradually coming to terms with the fact that, despite what my family may believe, I am competent and deserving. I've also shared my different difficulties with my coworkers. Unexpectedly, a lot of others had comparable experiences, which made me feel less alone and opened up some fantastic mentorship opportunities. My relationship with my fiancé has undergone the biggest shift. Our relationship has strengthened as we prepare for our wedding. Throughout it all, he has been my pillar of support, always ready to listen and offer uncritical support. We've discussed our future in great detail, including how we want to handle family dynamics with our own prospective children. Speaking up about my anxieties of repeating the habits I was raised with has been both frightening and freeing. In addition to being understanding, my fiancé has pledged to constantly work with me to establish a kind, encouraging household. While talking about wedding arrangements last week, an unforgettable moment occurred. To show my family that I'm deserving of a celebration, I acknowledge that a part of me wants a lavish wedding like my sister's. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, my fiancé replied. I want our wedding to be about us, not your parents or anybody else, because you deserve to be celebrated every day. His remark served as a warning. I came to the realization that I was still unconsciously trying to win my parents' approval. We have now made the decision to organize a wedding that accurately captures who we are as a couple. We have made some firm decisions. We intend to have a small, private ceremony with only our closest friends and family, perhaps at sunset on the beach or in a garden. We wish to honor our love and dedication in a cozy, happy setting. We're thinking of combining our love of the outdoors with the romance of beginning a married life by going trekking in a national park for our honeymoon. But I'm not sure if I should invite my sister and parents to the wedding. Reconciliation is something I wish for, but I'm afraid they'll ruin our day or say something cruel. My fiancé has been encouraging and has promised to support my decision no matter what. In order to establish clear guidelines for acceptable behavior, he has even offered to speak with my family if we invite them. My maid of honor, who is also my best friend, has been a huge help. She has immersed herself into the wedding planning process, and her excitement for this new phase of my life has been a lovely diversion from my complex familial feelings. She has been gently encouraging me to think about my own desires apart from any obligations to my family. I am reminded by her that today is your day. You deserve to be in the company of people who truly appreciate you. 2 months later, I'm in a lot better place. I'm beginning to see my own power and have more faith in myself. I'm learning that family is about people who support you without conditions, not simply genetic ties. And I'm creating a future with a partner who genuinely cherishes me. However, I continue to struggle with how to deal with my biological family. Should I risk drama by inviting them to the wedding? Should I speak with them again before making a decision? Or ought I to concentrate on this new phase of my life? Reddit, I'd love to know what you think. How have you responded to comparable circumstances involving weddings and family? I would appreciate any guidance on establishing limits or having challenging conversations. Once again, I appreciate your help. Having this place to reflect and share is really meaningful. I'll keep you informed as events develop. Update 2. Since my last update, which was a month ago, a lot has transpired. I appreciate all of your suggestions and encouragement regarding my previous post. We decided to invite my sister and dad after considerable discussion with my therapist and fiancé. We took our time creating the ideal invitation, attempting to mix being warm with setting up appropriate boundaries. I didn't get the response I was hoping for. My mother called me 3 days after I sent out the invites. She initially appeared thrilled, but then the inquiries began. Why is the wedding so small? Do you not wish to have a formal celebration as your sister did? She laughed when I told her that we wanted a small ceremony that was true to who we were. You've always been really challenging. For once, can't you simply act normally? I made an effort to maintain my composure by applying the strategies I've been learning in therapy. I clarified that since it was our day, we intended to celebrate it any way we saw fit. My father picked up the phone at that point. I have been speaking with your mother, he stated forcefully. We believe that this little wedding is a mistake on your part. Family members find it embarrassing. What are people going to think? I was taken aback. They continued to care more about looks than about how happy I was. I remained calm and informed them that although I valued their opinions, the choice was definitive. My father was upset, and my mother was crying as the call ended. My fiancé was there to encourage me, even though I was shaken by the call, reminding me that their response was about them and not about us. He held me while I sobbed. My sister sent me an unexpectedly encouraging text the following day. I called her bewildered. At first, our chat was difficult, but she opened up as we spoke. She remarked, "I've been considering our relationship a lot. I had no idea how much you were going through. You know, I've always envied you." I was surprised. "Did you envy me?" "But the favorite was always you." She gave a sorrowful laugh. "I always felt like I was living in your shadow. Maybe to our parents you were really intelligent and motivated. I believed that in order to receive any attention at all, I needed to be the life of the party." For the first time in years, we actually spoke for hours on end. I apologized for the resentment I had held, and she apologized for the instances in which she had been disrespectful. It seemed like a beginning, but it wasn't a miracle solution. But a new problem has emerged as a result of our increased knowledge. My sister wants to contribute to the wedding and play a significant role in it. I'm excited about the prospect of repairing our connection, but I'm also cautious. Could it be that this is merely preparing me for further disappointment? Although he believes it's a good step, my fiancé is letting me make the final decision. My best buddy, who reminds me of all the hurt I've endured in the past, is more wary. She remarked, "It's acceptable to have hope, but remember to take precautions as well." I'm conflicted. Though I'm afraid of exposing myself to additional suffering, this could be the start of a new, healthy relationship with my sister. Then there is our parents' problem. If my sister is involved but they are kept at a distance, how would they respond? Regarding the actual wedding, we are proceeding with our preparations. We've located a stunning garden location that embodies the private, romantic ambience we're aiming for. We've decided on a color palette, selected flowers, and begun researching catering choices. I'm getting enthusiastic about these details despite the familial drama. Regardless of who shows up, it serves as a reminder that this day is about celebrating our love. Throughout everything, my fiancé has been my pillar of support. He's given me space when I've needed to think things through alone, been understanding when I've needed to rant, and given me advice when I've asked for it. I'm even more convinced that marrying him is the perfect choice because of his consistent support. I'm focusing on establishing and upholding limits in my treatment. In order to prepare me for any challenging situations that may come up, my therapist has been helping me rehearse reactions to possible events at the wedding. Having to prepare for a confrontation on what should be one of the best days of my life makes me feel empowered, but it also makes me a little melancholy. I'm at another fork in the road. Reddit. Should I accept my sister's offer to assist with the wedding, which could lead to a reconciliation but also increase the likelihood of further harm? How do I strike a balance between the need to protect myself and my desire for family harmony? Furthermore, how can I deal with my parents' criticism without allowing it to ruin our special day? Any guidance or first-hand knowledge would be very valued. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support. You have no idea how much it means. Update 3. A week has passed since our wedding, and I wanted to give everyone who has helped me along the way this last update. Everything's all occurred so quickly, and I'm still absorbing everything. I gave my sister's offer to assist with the wedding a lot of thought before accepting. Although it was a risk, I thought it was worthwhile. There was a lot going on in the days before the wedding. I was astonished at how well my sister and I worked together on the last-minute details. Although there were tense moments, we were able to resolve them and have open communication. The actual wedding day was tense. My parents were seated in the front row. As I started down the aisle, my father actually grinned at me while my mother wiped at her eyes. It was something, even though it wasn't the kind of proud, warm smile I had always wanted. The ceremony was kind, intimate, and all we could have imagined. I felt as though everything else vanished as my fiancé and I exchanged vows. We were the only ones making pledges to one another at that very moment. My sister came up to me with a tiny, wrapped surprise during the reception. An exquisite silver bracelet that had belonged to our grandmother was found within. She gave me the bracelet, which had been a source of conflict between us for years, as a gesture of goodwill. My father later asked me to dance, which surprised me. Your mother and we may not have always understood you, but seeing you today, you seem happy, he remarked as we moved uncomfortably to the music. Incredibly joyful. Felt like an acknowledgement, but it wasn't an apology. The remainder of the evening was a haze of joy, dancing, and laughter. Although there were tense times, it was a happy occasion all around. Throughout it all, my new spouse was by my side, cheering me on in the good times and encouraging me in the bad. My sister took me aside one final time as we were heading out on our honeymoon. I want you to know that even though our relationship hasn't always been easy, I'm proud of you, she said. Additionally, I hope that we can continue to improve our friendship. Since the wedding, the days have been a combination of peaceful introspection and honeymoon delight. Disengaged from the outside world and concentrating on one another, my spouse and I hiked in a national park for a fantastic week. I'm trying to take in all that happened now that we're home. Since I got back, I've been seeing my therapist, and we've been discussing how I feel about the wedding and how it will affect my future relationships with my family. She has reminded me that it's acceptable to still feel conflicted while also encouraging me to recognize the constructive actions that were performed. My spouse and I have discussed limits and the type of connection we hope to have with my family in the future. We acknowledge that maintaining open communication is important, but we also recognize that our small family must come first. Since the wedding, my sister and I have texted each other a few times. They have been friendly yet hesitant. Next week, we're going to get together for coffee to discuss this further. Although there is still some tension with my parents, there seems to be a change. When my mother called to inquire about the honeymoon, the conversation was a little stilted, but it lacked the criticism I've grown accustomed to. I'm struck by how much has changed as I think back on the entire experience, from my first post to this point. I'm not gullible enough to believe that our family's problems are all behind us. I'm aware that much work remains to be done, but I feel hopeful for the first time in a long time. This process has taught me a lot about who I am. Even when people don't value me, I've learned to set boundaries, stand up for what I want, and value myself. I've discovered that while it's acceptable to wish for improved ties with my family, their acceptance does not determine my value. Above all, I've discovered that family isn't just about blood. It's also about the people who encourage you, share in your happiness, and support you through your hardships. Through this, my best friend, my spouse, and even some of you on Reddit have been like family to me. I want to let anyone who is dealing with comparable family problems know that things do get better. It may not be flawless. It may not be what you had anticipated. However, there is still hope. Don't be scared to set boundaries. Surround yourself with people that genuinely care about you, and keep improving yourself. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. I have greatly benefited from your counsel, support, and shared experiences. Without you, I couldn't have survived this. Cheers to fresh starts, recovery, and building the kind of love and support that each of us deserves. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My fiancé's best man is planning to slut-shame me during his wedding speech as a joke, and I'm unsure how to handle it. What should I do? Original post. April 1st, 2024. My fiancé, best man, groomsman, and I have known each other since we were kids. We collectively met between 6th and 7th grade and have been running around in the same friend group ever since. The group has grown and shrunk over the years, but a small core of us have remained extremely close. Recently, my fiancé's best man, Jay, 30M, has been making jokes when we're hanging out about the two of us dating that have now escalated. Admittedly, when I met Jay in 6th grade, I had the hugest crush on him, and everyone knew. I was much taller than average for a girl at that age, and he was one of 2 guys in the entire school as tall as me. That, though, is where the story ends. I had one hell of an awkward phase in middle school, and he was very clear from the start that he was not into it. Post-awkward phase, as friends and adults, it was something we constantly joked about but never seriously, since everything between us had always been platonic. This joke of me being rejected by him has now recently turned into how he dated me first whenever fiancé and I are around, despite the inaccuracy and an increase of it being brought up. Everything has remained pretty lighthearted in context and, while annoying, is something I have been able to brush off or quickly rebuttal. This escalated this weekend when 2 of fiancé's groomsmen were over hanging out with fiancé and I. The wedding was brought up and, after a concerning look between the two, they mentioned something had happened with Jay they thought we should know about. Apparently, Jay had been telling them stories he was considering for his best man speech, with the main one centering around how I had been shared around and had made my way through the entire friend group. While they kept what was explicitly said fairly vague out of respect for me, they were clear it had crossed the line and insisted I had slept with the entirety of the group attending the wedding. They were very clear with Jay that he could not say anything like this in his speech/toast. Jay responded with an, "I know," stating that I had already made it clear my maid of honor would be proofreading all speeches prior to the wedding, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway, but ended the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "But what if I could?" leaving the possibility open. Of all the groomsmen in the party, 6 including Jay, these 2 were the only ones in this core friend group and the only ones I had any sort of history with that could potentially be notable. It was all prior to high school and very innocent. One I went on my first movie date with, where our parents had to drop each of us off because we couldn't drive and picked us up afterwards. The other was the classic first 6-month relationship in middle school, where it took 6 weeks to muster up enough courage to hug each other between classes in the hallway. Sure, we made out and very middle school level things happened, but this is something we've all laughed about now for over a decade. I wasn't the only girl in this larger friend group, and throughout the years this was something that happened pretty frequently. Because we grew up in a smaller area, overlap happened like this regularly in every group and even more so as we went through high school. My fiancé is the only one I have seriously dated or had any sort of intimate relationship with of this friend group. We had an on-again, off-again relationship throughout high school that ended for a bit once I moved out of state for college. But we remained close friends and eventually reconnected when I moved back in 2019. We started dating in 2021 and got engaged in 2023. He's the only one in all of this I've ever slept with, who has seen me naked, and so on, making the situation even more odd and off-putting. Jay and I have been close friends since high school. When fiancé was in a toxic relationship that isolated him from Jay, after ID left for college, Jay would reach out to me for advice on school, girls, relationships, and more. He had always been our #1 supporter, advocating for fiancé and I to reconcile our relationship throughout college and into adulthood. He even took a bit of credit and would throw around an "I told you so" here and there when we eventually did reconnect. I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an additional post about how frustrated, confused, wronged, and uncomfortable I feel, all of which I plan to discuss in more detail with fiancé after sitting on the issue for a bit longer. We've all talked about it, recognizing the way Jay is framing things as wrong, but fiancé and the groomsmen are able to brush it off in a way I feel like I can't. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Additional information. Fiancé and I aren't getting married until the end of next summer. So much of the conversations we had about toasts and speeches have been more theoretical, except that a few have asked for the opportunity to give a toast, including best man. We have loosely put this information and saved the dates on the website and other prints. Fiancé and best man have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors and inseparable until they each went their own way for college. My fiancé's parents basically raised him alongside fiancé. Jay has strictly only ever expressed platonic feelings for me, even when both single or alone together. We have only ever acted as friends towards each other after the embarrassing early middle school crush I had. TLDR. My fiancé's best man is lying about having history with me as well as my history with others, proposing the idea that he calls me out as a joke for being shared around their friend group in his best man speech/toast at our wedding. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Update 1. April 3, 2024. First, I wanted to thank those who were clear and honest about how alarming the situation was from their perspective. When posting, I was still processing various feelings about the matter and still am, which not only limited my ability to really look at the situation from a different perspective but also left me in a state of paralysis of what to do next, both long and short term. Given the nature of this situation, there was a lot of historical context that was omitted to avoid making the original post too lengthy. I have done my best to include the context that seems most relevant based on the original comments in my update below. Update since posting. I have spoken in further detail to both my fiancé and one of the other groomsmen. I also confided in my maid of honor about the situation for an additional perspective outside of this specific friend group. After these conversations and reading through all comments on the original post, I've come to realize the significance of a few key details. Jay has a deep-rooted superiority complex. He always has, and it is something many in our friend group have become accustomed to. He has always been the type who seemed to believe he was the standout amongst his friends, whether that be through education, athletics, his career, or with women. Jazz has also always been a bit egocentric, and a lack of accountability or consequences for his actions has been growing for some time now. Despite it almost always being unintentional, he more often than not is oblivious to the inconveniences and harm he causes others as long as it is beneficial to his personal ego. This is about jealousy from a few different angles, but not about me specifically. When looking at the full picture, this escalation feels like a continued attempt to knock my fiancé down for reaching that next stage in life. Whether that is because fiancé has reached it before him or has moved onward without him, I cannot say for sure. Jay has issues with misogyny that have also been escalating in tangent with everything else. His lack of respect for the women he has dated has also seemed to increase. Much of the personal tension he and I have had recently pertained to his perspective of women that have begun to veer into a more disrespectful realm, alluding to an increased belief that, due to their gender alone, women are inferior. The good friend he was to me over the years, who was always kind and supportive, who never overstepped boundaries and was always there when needed, can exist in tangent with the above information. They are not mutually exclusive. Life happens and people grow, sometimes in opposite directions. I spoke in depth with one of the groomsmen to have further transparency of the situation and what was explicitly said. He acknowledged that the conversation initially centered around the excitement they had for the wedding, and Jay clearly stated he wanted to give fiancé and I the best wedding and experience possible. The conversation evolved, and Jay mentioned looking for icebreakers for his speech/toast and began bouncing a variety of distasteful jokes that focused more so on the expense of my fiancée than anything else. Then the idea was proposed about explicitly stating that my being passed around the friend group was how they all remained relatively close since middle school and high school. Jay was immediately shut down by the other groomsmen, told to know his audience, and also recognized he was openly alluding to things that were untrue and that could have an extremely negative impact on me personally. The conversation stopped shortly after this, and the groomsmen, without context of how this issue had been escalating, chalked it up to a one-off situation with Jay acting full of himself in the moment. Fiancé and I are the first of our cohort to get married and have a full-blown wedding with a ceremony and reception. These comments did not start escalating until after our engagement, roughly 1 year ago, following Jay's breakup with his long-term girlfriend. Jay has never made comments like this to me or my fiancé privately or when it is just the three of us together. Any scenario where this has been an issue has been in an environment which involved others, and mostly others that are not a part of this cohort from middle school. So what next? As mentioned in my original post, I spoke with fiancé in detail about the situation and how I was feeling. When all of this had been brought to our attention a few days prior, in an attempt to preserve myself in the moment, I brushed it off more so than I probably should have. I do not blame fiancé for not having any immediate or strong reaction in the moment because I had avoided one myself. I think it's important to note that Jay is not a day-to-day character in our lives. While he travels frequently for work that brings him to our area, we live states apart. He has not lived in the same area as me or my fiancé since high school. Much of this evolution with his personality has happened in the last few years as well. I recognize this is not an excuse for the lack of accountability on our part, but felt it added an important context that this was not something that was observed and ignored daily, but one that has slowly been recognized over time, since we maybe see him 4 times a year at most. Fiancé was extremely open in conversation, immediately brought up having a conversation with Jay, but admitted to not viewing this as anything more than Jay just being Jay, and that he was all talk. At this point, we had only discussed how Jay had continually escalated the situation and how uncomfortable I had now become from this. The lack of accountability fiancé had made for Jay's action definitely hurt, but then I recalled a commenter who had asked if I still considered Jay a friend, because he actually was, or because that was how it has always been. To sum up what turned into a lengthier and much more productive conversation with fiancé, I told him that while I recognized his friendship with Jay was something that had always been a part of his life, I did not personally want to be friends with him anymore. After this, I brought to fiancé's attention that while the scenario was explicitly about me and attacking the integrity and character of a 12-year-old girl, every action or usage of the scenario was used against him to invalidate his accomplishments of getting married or make him come off as less than. I told fiancé it was up to him on how he handles his conversation with Jay, but regardless, the disrespect Jay had shown me in this was a clear statement of what he thought of our own personal friendship. I firmly believe it is not my place to force how my fiancé handles his own personal relationship with Jay in this. All of this was deeply taken to heart, and you could tell that fiancé had started coming to his own realizations as the conversation progressed. He recognized that if the roles were reversed or if it had been any one of my bridesmaids slandering me or him in any way, he would be firmly advocating for me to reevaluate my friendship with him. Fiancé asked for a few days to stomach the information himself and reflect on what he wants to say to Jay. He asked if it would be acceptable for him to bring up that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jay personally, and I said yes. I was clear that if Jay wanted to talk with me following their conversation as well, it would need to be the three of us and not a personal conversation. I am still evaluating how to approach the speech's toasts at our wedding and be open to perspective and ideas. For now, I reserve the right with my fiancé to omit Jay from giving a speech and having my fiancé choose another groomsman to do so in his place, potentially canceling the speech's toasts altogether. And if Jay is allowed to give a toast, telling the DJ to cut the mic if need be, all of which he agreed with. There is still plenty of time for the situation to develop and for potential future updates, but I wanted to again thank those that emphasized the seriousness of this issue, gave their honest input and advice on how to handle the situation, and provided perspective on what they believe should be done next. When originally posting, I was still in a state of shock, trying to accept the situation as it had unfolded. Your responses constructively pushed me into the reality of what was happening and what I was feeling. Relevant comments/additional info. Miserably_winning. Wow, I have a couple of comments. How were you and fiancé friends with this guy for that long and been okay with his behavior? Why is his best man so comfortable to even joke about something like that? Why does he need time to digest cutting him off? Why is he even still involved in the wedding? Personally, I wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect my significant other, let alone someone I'm supposed to be marrying. Best man or not, I think they are both walking red flags. J for being a misogynist and your fiancé for not cutting him out of the wedding and his life. OP. Happy to answer since I think it will be help for many. I also added a very small edit to the update to acknowledge a bit of this. Much of this behavior has developed over time and apart from all of us. As a kid, he always had a superiority complex, but he was also very kind and respectful. It came off more as immaturity than anything else. Plus, at the time, we were kids too. Following high school, Jay and I each moved a significant distance away from where we grew up. He still lives that far away. We get together maybe 4 times a year at most, and I genuinely believe he did not see me as more than some woman to use as collateral to knock his friend down when he made those comments. Fiancé has no brothers, and Jay has always been a part of his life, filling that space. Jay also has no immediate family in his life and hasn't for quite some time, making fiancé's role a bit more impactful. It is much more similar to him cutting off a brother than just another friend. Fiancé has also always been extremely kind and had a very peaceful soul. Don't get me wrong, while fiancé prefers to avoid conflict, he has always been willing to stand up when necessary as well. I don't believe he realized how much had been at his expense as of late until after our conversation. Given their long history, I believe he's reflecting on a lot more than just this specific situation. The wedding is still over a year away and not until the end of next summer, and this all has happened in less than a week. Neither fiancé nor I have talked with Jay yet, so I did not feel it was right to post about any hard decisions regarding cutting him from the wedding and so on. These things can be taken as a joke for sure, but the level of disrespect is too great, and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. OP. This was a huge part of the larger conversation we had and something my fiancé acknowledged as well. I think initially it was viewed under the lens of us collectively being childhood friends and fiancé is the mediator, rather than the lens of me as his wife, until our second, much larger conversation. Op's reply about the fiancé's reaction. It's only been a handful of days since this all came to light. I wish your fiancé's reaction had been more about coming to your defense than Jay's, but understand that sometimes people need time to truly process all that contributes to a messy situation, especially one with deep roots and close ties. OP. Thank you for conveying this so well. I did my best to add an emphasis to this but could not do so as well in my own words and fear it got lost in the length of the post. Something for me to work on in future posts for sure. I very much have worries and, knowing my personality, will also be worried day of. I expressed this to my fiancé as well, and he completely understood. I recognize there is still plenty of concern to still address with my fiancé, but given how fresh the situation is, I wanted to afford myself a little grace of absorbing my feelings for what has happened before figuring out exactly what to do. I lost a friend, too. Update 2. October 11th, 2024. I'm considering canceling our wedding and calling off our engagement over a pizza. TLDR. After canceling his health insurance without discussion or my knowledge, and a severe lack of support, consideration, and accountability, I'm considering calling everything off. Buckle up, because this is a long one. While the drama around my fiancé's best man has simmered, the deeper issues surrounding a lack of support have not. Apologies in advance for this not being centered around my fiancé's best man. Not much has honestly changed. A conversation between them was had, much of which was my fiancé assuring him that things would blow over and accommodating Jay's stresses that it was only a joke. While my fiancé acknowledged what was said was wrong, the conversation wasn't to set boundaries. I eventually had to have my own conversation with Jay that my fiancé stood silently in the room for. I reached my breaking point 2 weeks ago. Following everything with his best man and a few other challenges we'd been facing, I tried putting my best foot forward these past 6 months. I sought out therapy to address the lack of support and anxiety I was feeling, and have made intentional efforts to work on our relationship to ensure we were in a stronger place before committing to each other. In May, after some unexpected and startling health concerns requiring an emergency room visit, my fiancé came clean to me about secretly canceling his health insurance in January without talking to her telling me. When I asked him why, he blamed the cost of the wedding being too expensive and wanting to save the $150 a month, taking no other accountability for his actions outside of an apology. I have a small amount of experience in accounting and have budgeted the wedding down to the last dollar. This has included the consideration of inflation and other potentials as well. In total, from the smallest decoration to the cost of a marriage certificate, everything comes down to around $22,000, all of which I have strategically budgeted for throughout our 2-year engagement. My parents have graciously given us $144,000 as well to help with the expenses, and I have personally taken on the price of my dress, wedding bands, and a slightly larger portion of the vendors. To put it simply, while it may not be as much as others, we have privilege. Not only was there no need for this cancellation, but I have yet to see any of that additional support for expenses. Regardless, in response, I took it upon myself to take more of the costs on and pursue a part-time job on top of my full-time position that earns roughly $770,000 a year. While it's not by a large margin, I do make the most between us individually and have a larger responsibility in my daily work life with longer hours and a significant level of expected travel. As a result, the choice to take on a part-time role was not one of want, but of desire to ease the burden he was feeling. I started a role reviewing blogs, essays, resumes, and other forms of writing in July. In our relationship quickly untraveled because I commute. I typically arrive home 3 hours after my fiancé. After arriving, I would immediately have to hop on my laptop and review writings for the next 2 hours or so to stay on top of my quota. I tried my best to make a routine out of it so we would have intentional time together once I finished each night. This was met with cold shouldering, frustration, and a lack of consideration for my level of exhaustion and strain for months. Anytime I asked him to choose a show to watch or decide on dinner, he usually does cook because I get home so much later. While I revised, I was met with scoffs and accusations that I no longer cared to tend to our relationship. I tried countless times to address his frustrations and was shut out or cornered in a circular argument about my priorities. 2 weeks ago, I was slated to travel for my full-time position to Atlanta during Hurricane Helen. In a matter of 12 hours, my afternoon flight for the next day was shifted to one leaving at 5 a.m. to give me ample time to shelter in place prior to the arrival of the storm. I rushed home to finish packing and prepare myself to drive over an hour to the airport and stay at a hotel nearby for additional flexibility in case of issues surrounding my early travel that next morning. After arriving home, I immediately hopped in the shower and asked my fiancé to order dinner so we could have one final meal together. During my shower, he offered to order a hot honey, jalapeno, and pineapple pizza from a new place we'd been wanting to try, which I normally would have been happy to try. However, I don't like jalapeno the way some people don't like cilantro, and I'm avidly against pineapple on pizza, something that's come up multiple times during our relationship. And while I'm good with spice, the idea of taking that on with the travel stress and early start time I had the next day made me hesitant. I calmly asked if there was another option for tonight, and if we could try that specific pizza once I got home instead, expressing my concerns over my nerves, which received a frustrated scoff and sarcastic response of, "What then? Just cheese?" I explained any other topping combination would work and restated my issues. He walked out of the bathroom without response, and I finished my shower. The pizza was never ordered. No food was ordered. I followed up as soon as I got out of the shower, asking if there was another option he wanted or a place he wanted to consider, and received a prompt, "No." As I finished getting ready, I asked if anything had been ordered again, and no. I finally snapped and begged and demanded him to order the hot honey pizza because I was out of time. He accused me of making him feel like he's forcing me into the decision, but after a bit of back and forth, the pizza was ordered and the mood immediately shifted. Everything was peaceful, warm, and loving at home up until I left. Yet, I cried the entire hour and 15-minute drive to the airport hotel. I cried the entire next day throughout the storm in Atlanta and the entire day after. Following a lack of sleep, stress, and intense emotions, I had a complete mental breakdown, realizing I can't live like this. I called my fiancé and poured out every frustration, emotion, and feeling, which I admit was probably not presented in the best light, but none of it was well received. In the 2 weeks since, despite many attempts, conversations have gone nowhere, with only ultimatums being offered for me to make. I've proposed countless alternatives that focus on us working on ourselves and together these next few months. But he is only seeking an answer to whether or not we will be getting married next summer, and has made it known this is a decision that must be made by the end of October. At this point, I don't see how I can possibly gain the confidence to commit myself to him by next summer. For the sake of not doubling the length of this post, I will leave it at this for now. All of this is being discussed with my therapist at this time. He has chosen not to pursue counseling with me, despite my asking and advocating. Many words have been expressed, and I'm trying, but I'm starting to second-guess and waver on just how far love can get me through all of this. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I caught my wife cheating with her old fling on a hike. It turns out she and her friends had been using him as a surrogate joystick. I, Ollie, 38, am currently on a camping/hiking trip with my wife, Liv, 36, and 3 other married couples. Dom and Kate, Sean and Sarah, Bill and Miranda, as well as Liv's longtime friend, Ian, 38, and his boyfriend, OD, whose real name is Orlando, and no, he was not named after the dog from Garfield. We're all in our mid-30s to early 40s and enjoy spending time outside. We've been wanting to go on this hike for a while. We camp at night and walk throughout the daytime. Everything was great until early evening on the 3rd day of our 8-day journey. We stopped to camp, and my wife and I decided to explore the surroundings. We discovered a little waterfall feeding into a creek that followed the trail we had been trekking. It was roughly 5 feet tall and flowed largely onto rocky rocks below. My wife stated that she wanted to rinse off in the stream and waterfall but did not want to soak her clothes. I urged her to go for it because we weren't far from the others and the location was secluded enough. I responded, "If you make it quick, you could be in and out in no time." She did exactly that, lingered for a moment before stepping out and air-drying with a tiny towel. Ian arrived unexpectedly from behind some trees after she had quickly put her shorts and panties back on. My wife was still topless. Here's where everything got weird. Neither of them responded. She proceeded to dress casually, and Ian approached as if he had seen her naked 100 times before. He told us that Dom wanted us to know something, but I can't remember what. My wife and Ian exchanged small talk before we all headed back to camp. It is now day 5. The hiking track leads to a small town where we want to spend the night at a local inn to rest, resupply supplies, and recover. For the past 2 days, I've been thinking about what happened at the waterfall. I tried to keep my thoughts hidden, but my wife questioned me this morning why I was so quiet yesterday. I told her I was weary, but in reality, I can't stop thinking about something that happened between her and Ian previously. I would normally be less skeptical, but I know Ian is not gay. I've known him for around 8 years and consider him a friend. We husbands and OD are the outliers in this group, as the 4 wives and Ian have been buddies since college. I've asked my wife before if she's ever dated Ian, and she's always responded no. I also inquired if Ian and any of the other ladies in the group had ever been in a relationship, and she denied that too. I might be delusional, but their relationship felt too similar, especially since she was still topless. My wife is usually very conservative about her body, so her lack of reaction to Ian's presence struck me as odd. I have no tangible reason to believe anything is wrong, but I can't shake the sensation that there's more to their history than friendship. Am I being paranoid? Or is this a red flag? I am really trying not to leap to conclusions. Update 1. It's early morning on day 6, and I wanted to give you all an update. I told my wife, Liv, about what happened at the waterfall. I wanted to talk to her while we still had some privacy before heading back out on the trail, and I'm glad I did. I started as non-confrontational as possible, simply remarking that it seems strange that she wasn't concerned by Ian's presence despite the fact that she was topless. If she had responded in any other way, I would have dropped it, but she became really defensive immediately. Is this why you've been moody? It's not a huge deal. Everyone has seen breasts before, including Ian. You have to grow up. This truly alarmed me. She rarely reacts forcefully until she feels bad about something. I probed harder, and she grew more reactionary and defensive, attempting to deflect and belittle every question I posed with a dash of gaslighting thrown in. I finally had enough and told her, either tell me what's going on, or I'm going to confront Ian, who you know won't lie. This is when Liv revealed that she and Ian had a previous sexual relationship. I became enraged and demanded to know why she lied to me after I had previously asked her about it. She claimed she did not lie. They never dated. It was simply an FWB, friends with benefits, situation before we became formal. I asked her, startled and agitated, "So you were sleeping with him when we first started dating?" She retorted, "You don't have to be so vulgar. I don't want to discuss this right now. Can't we have this conversation when the trip is over?" I said, "Absolutely not. Either you tell me everything now, or I'll start interrogating your pals." I believe she saw how serious I was and decided to reveal the whole truth. The first part one already knew. She had a string of bad relationships and dating encounters. Liv ascribed a large portion of this to not getting to know the other person before leaping into bed with them. When we started dating, she asked if we could take it slow. I accepted, since I was also seeking for something unique and I was extremely intrigued in Liv. She said I could date others until we chose to be official, but I told her I didn't want to date around and preferred to focus on one relationship at a time. She stated it made her really happy. Then she divulged something that would shock everyone if it became public. Liv, Kate, Miranda, and Sarah all had comparable FWB situations with Ian while dating their current husbands. Kate, who is now married to Dom, became fed up with dating the wrong guys shortly after graduation. During this time, she and Ian became FWB. When she met Dom, she urged that they take it slow and get to know each other before becoming intimate. Kate stated it was simple because she was still sleeping with Ian, meeting her sexual needs while focusing on the emotional part with Dom. Ian was happy with the arrangement, assuring her that it was all about finding her special someone. They would talk about Dom and sleep together, and when Kate realized she had found the one, they ended the FWB arrangement, and she began her sexual relationship with Dom. They eventually got married. Kate later informed the other women about their agreement. Throughout the years, they each used Ian as a surrogate while looking for the one. I'm only the most current individual involved in this circumstance. I asked Liv to explain her role. The other women's marriages are their own business, but I was curious how this worked out for her. She informed me that after her former lover had too many narcissistic characteristics, she had had enough and wanted to meet a good guy, which I suppose was me. She asked Ian to help her in the same manner he had helped the other three. Ian agreed, explaining that the whole affair was about finding her a life partner. I feel he was sincere in everything. He's a free-spirited type of person. I've had serious chats with Ian, and he's the type of person that will help anyone with anything. We play golf together, and he has been in my life since I began dating Liv. I didn't realize he was so involved. Essentially, he would listen, offer counsel, and talk through her emotions so she could wait until she felt comfortable with me. I felt like throwing up. It feels like the entire relationship was a lie. Despite this, I continued to seek answers. I asked when she quit seeing Ian. She claimed it was when we became official. I told her that I thought we were formal when we agreed to date, so I asked her when she considered us official. She explained, "Dating does not constitute two people as a couple. When you asked me to commit and we had our first intercourse, we were official." She stated that she and Ian had been strictly platonic since that night. I mentioned that was 7 months into dating. "So you've been sleeping with him for 7 months?" She became silent and I knew the answer. I said, "Let me be clear. I would pick you up for a date, and we would go out and have a great time, holding hands, cuddling, kissing, and making out. Then I'd drop you off, and you'd meet Ian, sleep with him, and brag about what a terrific person I am." She retorted, "Don't make it sound so dirty." I was appalled. I wanted to run, but we were in the middle of nowhere and there was no way out except to keep walking forward. In retrospect, I wish I had just left, but instead, I probed for more information. I inquired, When you say you slept together, do you mean you used him just to get yourself off? Or do you mean you did all the positions, foreplay, and kinky things that we do? She became very silent again. I gently stated, "You must answer my questions. I need to know, and I will find out, whether it is from you or one of them." With that, I motioned towards the other rooms. She answered slowly, "All of it. Maybe even more than with you." The room began spinning, but I asked the dreaded question, "When was the last time?" She said, "The night before our first time together." I'd never wanted to leave someone more than I did at that moment, yet all I could do was sit there in shock. She attempted to console me, but I ordered her to stay away. I needed time. With nowhere else to go, I gathered some blankets and pillows and slept on the floor at the foot of the bed. I passed out for a few hours, but I'm now up and making this update. I want to march out of here, but there's a 12-passenger van at the end of the route that I don't have the keys for. I'll have to stay with these people for another 2.5 days, with another half-day travel back. I do not know what to do. Part of me can understand the reasoning, but largely, I'm heartbroken and believe our entire relationship was a scam. I feel like a silver medalist, not a champion. I also have an intense need to share everything with everyone because all of these other guys are in the same circumstance. We are all here on false pretenses. I do not know what to do. I have about 1 hour till everyone gets up, and then I'll have to face Ian and my wife. Am I overreacting? Is this marriage worth saving? I do not see how we can go back. Update 2. I'm back in the comfort of my own house. Unfortunately, I and several others may be facing divorce. I was able to keep it together for the majority of day 6, but I'm sure everyone could tell something was up with me. I remained quiet and pushed myself to get back to the van. I guess Liv grabbed Ian aside about lunchtime and told him what I knew. After that, Ian began attempting to buddy up with me and converse, despite my request that he leave me alone. He persisted a couple more times before I snapped and told him to stop it in a very strong manner. Liv intervened and they both took the hint. I needed more time to process. The next 24 hours went relatively smoothly. Everyone just kind of left me alone. However, after snapping at Ian, his temperament altered dramatically. He shifted from his customary laid-back demeanor to becoming slightly distant with everyone. He would occasionally make subtle, passive-aggressive remarks, nothing too explicit, but clearly intended at me. By the 7th night, we had set up camp and I had relaxed a little, being more friendly with everyone. We were sitting around the campfire, finishing up the last of our meals. People were conversing, joking, and sharing stories. Billy told a long, embarrassing story from high school. It was a very humorous story about him and his first girlfriend, and he acted like an idiot. When he was done, he said something like, "I still can't believe I was ever that dumb. I still cringe just thinking about it." Ian responded, "Well, at least you grew up. Some people never grow up and overcome their past." He then stared at me with the most disdainful expression. In that time, I experienced an out-of-body experience and saw only crimson. The filter was gone and logic was out the window. It was on. "You know, Ian, you are right. Sometimes we just have to face the past head-on." Liv attempted to interrupt, but I disregarded her totally. "How about we address the fact that you used to have sex with all our wives while we were dating?" When I stated it, even the insects were quiet. "Oh, fellas, didn't you know either?" "Yeah, while they were holding out on us to make a connection," I air-quoted. Our future spouses were using Ian here as their human dildo. Dom and Billy seemed perplexed and angry. Sean had a look on his face like he just walked in on his grandmother fapping. Complete train disaster astonishment. But I wasn't finished. I turned to Dom. It was Kate who devised this incredible strategy. She realized that the secret to developing a long-term relationship was to take things slowly and get to know each other before getting into bed. All you need to deal with the impulses is a best friend who will blow your back out when you get home from your dates all hot and bothered. Dom jumped in at this time. "What the hell, Ali? How do you know this?" "Oh, I just found out 2 days ago that when I took Liv out for drinks, that wasn't going to be the only thing she was swallowing that night." At this time, Liv lost control and began yelling at me. "Why the hell are you doing this? You don't have to." However, she was cut short when Sean stood up. It is true. It is entirely true. Everyone fell silent and glanced at him. I have known since we were dating. I didn't realize it was also true for everyone else until after we got married. I apologize, Billy. I swear I didn't realize it was you two back then. Billy's expression was one of dread. Sean, we used to have double dates with Miranda and Sarah. We went out several times and then dropped them off at Ian's. Does that imply they? Sean simply stared at him and nodded. I quickly turned to Ian. Two at once? You hound dog. Then, in a fit of bravery, I howled like a wolf, which in retrospect is pretty terrible, but at the time I thought it was funny. Arguments broke out among the couples all around us, but an audible gasp and whimper caught everyone's attention. Odie sat there, tears spilling down his face. He looked at Ian and said, "Lies, more lies. Never ends. You always do this to me. No matter how much I forgive, or how many times I return your affection." He then slapped Ian and bolted down the trail. Ian ran after him. The other three couples mumbled under their breath at each other, then began walking away in different directions. I stood beside the fire, feeling triumphant. Liv approached me and said, "I hope you're happy." I looked her in the eyes and replied, "I've never been more effing happy with myself in my whole life. I'm currently 80-20 on obtaining a divorce." I suggested we postpone any major debates until we were home, unpacked, showered, and nourished, because the only thing she would achieve before then is push me to my limits. At that instant, she turned and entered our tent. The following day was the most embarrassing hours of my life. Between the morning pack-up, the hike to the van, loading up, and the 4.5-hour journey home, only around 19 words were spoken. Now I'm sitting in my bathroom, newly showered. I'm going to eat some chicken nuggets, drink 3 Dr. Peppers, and then converse with my wife. I'm not sure where we're headed from here, or where anyone else will wind up, but I know it won't be pretty regardless. Update 3. It's been 4 weeks since we returned from our trip, and everything seems to have crumbled. Dom and Kate are getting divorced. They have been together the longest of the couples and have a 10-year-old son. Dom took the relation quite hard. In addition to being together the longest, they also had the longest courtship period, 9 months. It's been a difficult pill for him to chew because he remembers they didn't truly get intimate until he began to wonder if he wanted to stay in the relationship. Now that he knows the truth, no matter what Kate says, he will always believe the delay was due to her desire to continue being with Ian. I sat down with Sean and had a couple of beers one night. Despite the fact that we just met through our wives, we've been very close friends over the years. Sean stated that Sarah was straightforward with him when they began dating. She informed him she intended to wait at least 3 months before having sex, but that she would still meet with her FWB. Sean liked her but told her he was simply casually dating until he knew for sure, which Sarah was fine with, so unlike the rest of us, Sean had a clear decision. Sean discovered he was falling for Sarah 2 weeks before the 3-month period ended. Following a few double dates with Billy and Miranda, he informed her he wanted to be exclusive. She broke the 3-month limit, and they became intimate that night and haven't looked back. Both were completely honest about their adventures at this time, and it appears that their candor paid off handsomely. Sean informed me they had a brief dispute after the campfire incident because Sarah felt they should have excused themselves rather than getting involved, but they are doing well as a couple overall. I've also got an update on Billy and Miranda. They are in the initial stages of reconciliation. Billy is clearly and understandably struggling. He believes she cheated and uses words to excuse it. They dated for 6 months before getting married, and they have 3 children under the age of 7, so they both believe they must try to make it work for the kids. Billy's toughest challenge is recalling dropping both Miranda and Sarah at Ian's on 2 consecutive occasions, knowing she had a threesome arranged. It reduced him to a shell of his former self. Miranda appears to have attempted to explain that they only did something on one of those nights and it was more akin to a reverse train than a full threesome. Once again, semantics are used as an excuse. Sean assures me Miranda is speaking the truth because Sarah was the second party and acknowledged it wasn't a true 3-way. But honestly, does it matter? Ian reached out to apologize. I told him to EF himself, then blocked him. Odie also reached out. I guess my revelation was the final straw for him. We have actually talked quite a bit over the last few weeks. We actually talked a lot over the course of a week, despite the fact that we had previously merely been cordial acquaintances. Turns out that Ian and OD had been on and off for 15 years. Ian presents a laid-back, selfless appearance to everyone else, but OD knows him to be incredibly self-centered and manipulative. Ian frequently breaks up with OD for brief periods of time or claims they are on a break, so he can do whatever he wants without being labeled a cheater, only to return once he has had his pleasure. Looking back, OD sees that at least 2 of these breaks occurred during these dating situations. However, OD is the most upset since he has tolerated it for so long and has given Ian numerous opportunities. He says this was the final straw. He's returning to Santa Barbara and leaving Ian and the cold, nasty Midwest behind for good. Despite our exhaustion after the hike, Liv and I had the longest chat. I informed her right away that I was not interested in arguing, disputing, or anything like that. I said, "Tell me everything you want to tell me. I will not interrupt or ask questions until you finish." Then I demand the exact same courtesy. She agreed. Her letter was filled with apologies and explanations. She would admit it was wrong, then explain why it was okay or point to a positive conclusion. She expressed her disappointment and hurt with how I behaved at the campsite, but she also realized that Ian deserved equal culpability for poking the bear. When she finished, she asked if I had any questions. I replied, "No," and then I began. I informed her that our entire relationship is based on false pretenses. I can see where you were coming from and why you tried the entire FWB thing. Your 3 best friends did it and scored excellent husbands before you, but on some level, all 4 of you had to understand that starting a relationship like this was wrong. It was tremendously distressing to learn that you were sleeping with someone else while we were getting to know each other, and I believe it impeded the natural progression of our relationship. I added, "It has significantly altered my memory of our early days together. Do you remember that fantastic day we had, approximately 4 or 4.5 months into our relationship? We spent the day together, finished with us back on my couch, kissing your shirt off, and me caressing you over your shorts. It was getting quite hot. You paused and apologized, stating you wanted to but weren't quite ready. You needed to be absolutely certain. I assured you that everything would be fine, and you gazed at me affectionately, kissed me passionately, and then departed. I stopped before saying, 'I can only guess you left my place and went to Ian's.' As she nodded, tears streamed down her face. I said, 'I invested that energy in you. You chose to give it to someone else rather than returning it to me. I might have been able to get over this if it had ended in the 1st or 2nd month when we were more relaxed, but after that, we spent a lot of time together and you maintained your relationship with him until the day before we became official. You enjoyed having us both. You did whatever mental gymnastics were required to justify it to yourself.' I told her, 'You may not realize it, but this last portion is the toughest part of it all for me. Learning that you were far more adventurous and exciting with him is like a dagger to the heart. It makes me feel like I'm second best, like I'm the retirement plan you choose, just good enough.' She interjected, saying, 'No, not like that. I love you. He was only having sex. It was not real. That's how it is when they don't matter. It's simpler to be free and wild then,' and so on. I waited for her to finish before saying, 'Remember, we agreed it was my turn to talk.' Afterward, I remarked, 'I see your point of view, but it is not mine. As your husband, I believe it is my responsibility to give you my full energy. Emotional, physical, cerebral, and sensual. I believe I have accomplished this during the past 8 years. I believe you have given me your best in some areas, but I now see I have not received your best in others. And as a male, I have to acknowledge that sensuous energy is really essential to me. The fact that you did not trust me with all of your sensual energy was the determining factor. I do not think I can recover from this, and I want to file for divorce.' The scene became chaotic from there. She started crying hard, asking, giving herself, and pleading with me to start over. I eventually removed myself from the situation. Later, she mentioned that we were just in an emotional state right now and that I needed to give it some time. This gave me pause, and I agreed to her terms of 3 weeks. As I previously stated, it has been 4 years and my feelings have been consistent. We met with a joint divorce lawyer who will represent both of us. There are no children involved, and we both want to sell the house, so the initial meeting went smoothly. She has been tremendously depressed, as have I, but this is for the best. Sometimes things simply don't work out. Thank you very much. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Am I the a-hole for telling my ex-hubby's mistress's family to take the baby, or I'll call Child Protective Services? 'Cause he had a heart attack and can't care for anyone. May 30th, 2024. I am a 53-year-old woman, and my soon-to-be ex-husband, Roger, who is 47, came home with a baby 4 months ago. Despite forgiving him for his affair, his 22-year-old girlfriend couldn't handle the responsibility anymore and left the baby with him at his workplace before leaving for Spain, as far as he knows. I allowed him to stay so long as I didn't have to do anything. I made it clear from the beginning that I had no intention of becoming involved in caring for this child, as my own children are grown and I have no desire to raise another. Well, about a month ago, Roger had a heart attack. It didn't kill him, more's the pity, but he is now very weak and incapable of doing anything for himself. Since he isn't up and about, he cannot care for his child. He also cannot drop off and pick up his son at daycare. This added a tremendous amount of strain to an already tense situation. I have been helping, but I'm done. My kids are full grown, and I shouldn't be having grandkids anytime soon. I do not have any desire to care for a baby, especially one that is a constant reminder of my husband's infidelity. The burden of childcare was never something I signed up for, and I feel it's unfair to expect me to shoulder this responsibility. I told Roger that I want a divorce, and I contacted the child's maternal grandparents. I know the father through friends. I said they had until Friday to come get their grandchild, or I would call Child Protective Services, CPS. I felt this was the best course of action for everyone involved, especially the child, who deserves a stable environment. They just left with the baby, but they scolded me for being so cold towards a baby that had done me no harm. I view that child differently. To me, the child represents a painful chapter in my life and a betrayal that I am still trying to process. Roger is recovering and I will be moving out. The house is in his name, but I have never contributed to it financially. I have the equivalent of 22 years of rent and interest put away, as per our prenuptial agreement. My savings are my own. I have been diligent in protecting my financial independence, and I intend to move forward with my life without relying on anything from this marriage. I work and don't need anything out of this marriage except myself. My kids tried telling me to stay and help their father. I said that they were welcome to come over and help him with cleaning himself and the baby. Both declined what I felt was a fair offer. I found it hypocritical that they expected me to take on this role while they themselves were unwilling to do so. I do not feel that I'm acting badly. However, Roger, our children, his child's family, and a few mutual friends think I am. They seem to believe that I should stay and continue to support Roger through his recovery and help with the baby. But I believe I have the right to prioritize my own well-being and mental health. Perhaps writing this out and seeing the responses will give me clarity. I am hoping that by sharing my story, I can gain a better understanding of my actions and whether I am justified in my decisions. This has been an incredibly difficult time, and I am doing my best to navigate through it with integrity and self-respect. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Not the A. That child was not your responsibility. Yes, it was innocent, but you're literally not responsible for raising it. You should have divorced Roger long ago. OP. And God forbid something happens, I literally cannot make any decisions regarding medical care or anything. Comment 2. Fake. Not the A. Serious. The child is only 4 months old. So there's no way you could have forgiven such a deep betrayal if you've been married for decades. The house is rightfully yours, so make sure you get what you owed. P. I think the baby is almost a year old. The house was a premarital asset on our prenup. Comment 3. I read over all of these comments. OP. Returning the child to blood relatives who can care for it is not the A on your part. However, Don't be the A to yourself and give up your house without first seeing an attorney to make sure you don't have a claim to any equity or retirement funds he may have. Don't leave without obtaining everything that is rightfully yours. You mentioned having savings for 22 years. That isn't enough for a lifetime. You may require more, so make sure to acquire it before you leave. OP. I have a little over $1 million in investments. I'll be fine. He paid for everything. I kept all my money. This comment was downvoted, but OP's reply made me laugh. Comment 4. Women these days are cold as. OP. I can forward your info if you are volunteering to take over. Update 2 June 26, 2024. Almost 1 month later. I am no longer divorcing Roger. Sadly, due to complications from his heart attack, he has passed away. This leaves me feeling very conflicted. On one hand, he was the love of my life, but on the other, he was a cheating piece of trash. To the best of my knowledge, the child's mother will not return from Europe. Currently, the child is staying with her parents. They reached out to me asking what I thought should be done. I recommended putting the child up for adoption, though I made it clear that I did not mean I would adopt the child myself. This suggestion was not well received by the grandparents or by my own children. My children accused me of being cold and cruel. They insisted that I should take responsibility, despite the child being related to them and not to me. I countered by suggesting that they, as blood relatives, should step up and take care of the child. However, neither of my children accepted this idea either. As the sole beneficiary of Roger's estate, I anticipate that lawyers will become involved to arrange some sort of financial support for the child. I am willing to comply with whatever the court orders, but I will only pay from Roger's estate and not from my own personal funds. This entire situation has been incredibly taxing, and I have been accused of being heartless. However, I believe I have a right to set boundaries and protect my own well-being. Rare's actions have left a lasting impact, and I am simply trying to navigate the aftermath as best as I can. Ultimately, I am committed to following through with whatever legal obligations arise, but I do not see it as my responsibility to personally care for a child who is not mine. I hope that by sharing this story and seeking advice, I can gain some clarity and perhaps some understanding of my actions and decisions. That is all I have to say on this matter. Relevant comments. Ages of OP's kids? They are adults. To a now-deleted comment. I found out about the affair over a year ago. Nothing about this is convenient. Comment 2 downvoted. So apparently, the affair wasn't that much of a problem, as you said you forgave him for that, but after he has a heart attack you decide to divorce him? It just doesn't add up. OP. I was not responsible for the child. Comment 3 true, that doesn't explain the divorce. I mean, you can divide for whatever reason, you do you. To me, however, infidelity seems like a better reason to divorce than having a heart attack. OP. I was not to care for the child at all. It was all on Roger. Can you explain how a bedridden man was to care for an infant? Comment 4. I agree you have zero responsibility to the child. However, if your kids did adopt, how would you feel about that, as the baby would then be your grandchild? P. Adopted grandchildren are great. To another new grandchild, I would do my best to treat them as such. Comment 5. Downvoted. Rogers may have omitted the child due to the child not being around when it was written. The child should inherit a portion. The child should be eligible for Social Security survivor benefits. Baby needs a lawyer ASAP. OP. Rogers will also admitted his 2 adult children. Comment 6. Downvoted. You are evil. You wished him dead, now he is. I hope you at least feel a little remorse for what you said. I don't. He broke me. To another commenter. We were getting divorced for a reason. Comment 7. Downvoted. 70% of the posts here are fake. Yeah, my husband just died and I'm dealing with this child situation on top of it. Gonna post on Reddit. P. The situation has been dealt with. I was asked by several people for an update. I have now fulfilled those requests. OP responds to so many people telling her she needs to help the child. Why does anyone think I have the right to place the child with anyone besides family? I am not in any way related to this child, and the child is currently with their grandparents, blood relatives, with standing in legal matters. Editor's note: to provide clarity, I've created a timeline based on the events described by the original poster, OP. 1. OP discovered the affair a year ago, around May 2023. At that time, she forgave her husband. 2. In January of this year, approximately 4 months before the original post, the baby was left with the husband, who promised to take care of the child. 3. The husband suffered a heart attack in April, about a month before the original post. 4. Between May and June 2024, the husband passed away. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My husband left me for another woman right after I gave birth. It's heartbreaking to handle this while caring for a newborn. June 16, 2024. We've been married for 3 years. I'm 30, and he's 34. 6 weeks ago, I had a baby. After giving birth, my husband became cold and distant. I thought he just needed time to adjust to our new normal, but it turns out he was planning to leave us. 2 weeks ago, he told me that it's not working out anymore, and he doesn't want to be married to me. The news broke my heart. I kept asking him why he was doing this to our family, and his response was, "I can't pretend anymore." He took all his clothes and left. 2 days later, I had a gut feeling that he was seeing someone else, so I checked his email and found hotel reservations. He had taken her on a vacation when I thought he was on a business trip. I searched her name on Facebook and saw him in the background of her pictures. Turns out this affair has been going on for a year. I'm devastated. Deal with this and taking care of a newborn baby. I've been crying all day for the past 2 weeks, deluding myself into thinking he will come back to us when he realizes he made a mistake. I texted him when I found out about the other woman, and he ignored me. Hours later, he asked how our son was doing, so I blocked him. I've been feeling so lost. I have no appetite and haven't been eating, which has resulted in my milk supply being very low. I don't know what to do anymore. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Do you have family or friends who can help support you? I know you don't feel ready, but you need legal advice as to your entitlements. You need him to pay child support at the very least. T. My parents have been really supportive. On if she is able to change the locks of the house. OP. Don't think I'm legally allowed to change the locks. Update 1, June 25, 2024. This morning, my husband came back, saying he made a mistake leaving his family and wants to work things out. These past weeks have been incredibly rough. I've cried myself to sleep many nights while taking care of a newborn baby. The emotional roller coaster has been overwhelming, and I feel utterly exhausted and drained. When he walked through the door, my heart sank. I'm still deeply hurting and feel even worse now that he's back. His return doesn't erase all the emotional stress he's caused me. The betrayal, the loneliness, and the sheer pain of feeling abandoned by the person I trusted the most are still fresh wounds. He left me and our baby when we needed him the most, during a time that should have been filled with joy and bonding as a new family. Instead, it was marred by his absence and the heartache of discovering his infidelity. The reality of him being with another woman while I was home caring for our child still stings deeply. Now I'm so lost and confused. On one hand, I want to believe that he is sincere, that he realizes the gravity of his mistake and truly wants to make amends. On the other hand, the trust that was shattered can't be easily rebuilt. I can't just forget the nights I spent alone worrying and the days I struggled to manage everything on my own. I'm torn between the desire to give our relationship another chance for the sake of our child and the need to protect myself from further emotional harm. His return has stirred up a whirlwind of emotions, and I'm not sure if I'm ready or even capable of moving past what happened. The fear of being hurt again looms large. I need time to process everything, to think about what I truly want and need. It's not an easy decision, and the weight of it feels immense. I just wish I had some clarity, some way to see a path forward that feels right for both me and my baby. Relevant comments. Comment. I wonder if she even knew he was married or had a pregnant wife/newborn baby. My guess is she recently found out. I think she knew. He told me he left her, but I don't believe him. I actually sent her a message and I'm currently waiting for a response. Comment 2. You need to speak with a lawyer because him being at the house instead of you may work against you in the divorce if it matters. OP. I asked him to leave, but he refused, so I left instead. I spoke to an attorney and they said I can't stop him from staying in our home. OP questioning if her husband was having a mental breakdown or not. OP. If that's the case, he was having a mental breakdown even before I got pregnant. He was having an affair before I even got pregnant, and it all unfolded when I gave birth. Update 2. Text messages from other woman June 26, 2024. Text with the AP and me confirm he's a liar and has been deceiving both of us. My previous post was quite vague, so I thought I'd provide more detail. When my husband came back yesterday, he apologized and said leaving was a huge mistake. He admitted he wasn't thinking straight and would do anything to make things right between us. He wants to be here for me and our son, repeatedly asking what he needs to do to make amends. I told him I didn't want to see him right now and that it was best if he left, but he refused. He kept begging to stay, saying he was sorry and calling himself an idiot who doesn't deserve me. I asked why he did this to us, and he admitted he wasn't thinking clearly and said nothing can justify his horrible actions. Transcripts of the text. Other woman, oh it's me. I don't use Messenger, so I thought it would be better to text you. He told me you were separated and that he'd started the divorce process. Ow, I feel so stupid now for believing him. OP. How long were you seeing each other? And did you know about our son all this time? Out of you. I met him a year ago at Starbucks where he paid for my coffee. That moment marked the beginning of our relationship. A few months ago, I discovered the baby and decided to break things off. However, he insisted that it didn't mean anything and kept expressing his desire to be with me. Ow. He moved in with me weeks ago, until this morning when he woke up and said he's going back to his family. OP. He told me weeks ago, the same time he moved in with you, that it wasn't working with us anymore, and he left me and our 4-week-old baby. LWOMG. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I wouldn't have let him move in with me if I had known. OP. You don't need to AP apologize. You didn't know. Ow. I'm stuck in a lease I can't afford by myself because he convinced me to get this apartment for us, only to bail on me. OP. How old are you? OW. 25. Ow. Please feel free to ask me anything you want to know. Ow. Were you ever separated? OP. We were never separated and lived together until a few weeks after I gave birth. Elda. Did he tell you why we separated? P. He didn't say much. It was very brief. All he mentioned was that things weren't working out between us and something about growing apart. Ow. When I found out you were pregnant, he said you were trying to trap him with the baby. OP. Our child was planned, actually, and it was his idea to begin with. As clear as day, he's a pathological liar. Ow. Is he back at your house? Or was that also one of his lies? OP. He came back, but we're not getting back together. Ow, good for you. He's an... Ow, for the record, I'm done with him too. Relevant comments. How did OP feel after talking with the other woman? OP, thank you. I tried my best to be understanding and not get upset. This woman owes me nothing. I can't be mad at her. If the other woman knew about the baby, she was with the husband for a year before OP found out. She knew, but my guess is she really loved him and didn't care. Regardless, this is all on him. He was lying to both of us. I think she just wanted confirmation since we both know he lies about everything. Everything. If she chooses to take him back, that's on her. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.